stand a chance against you? You have a flaming sword?" Jon asked. "Well, I dip it in wildfire," Thoros admitted. "Ruins the blade, but creates an impressive sight. Only thing is, it's very expensive. Didn't want to waste the money this time." "I am sure it would have made an impressive sight," Jon said. "But now I have to continue with the melee. Wouldn't want to leave my opponents waiting." "You're right, good luck," Thoros said, and also went off to the side. The only remaining duel that was happening was a very beat-up Greatjon fighting against a much fresher-looking Daisy. It seemed the duel with the Hound had been hard fought for Greatjon. Jon waited for them to finish, and it luckily did not take long. After more than a few painful-looking strikes from Daisy's mace, the Greatjon eventually yielded. Jon could see countless bruises litter his face, and the sections of the arms that had been left bare by the armor. "Well, it looks like it's just us now, good sister," Jon smirked. "Don't expect me to go easy on you, good brother," Daisy grinned in return. "I wouldn't dream of it. I am much more scared of your mace than of the Kingslayer's sword." "A wise thing, Jon. Now, are you ready?" "Aye, let's get this over with." They both got into position, and soon clashed. Jon had beaten Daisy before in spars, so he knew he could win, but it had always been very painful before he did so. This time was no exception. Despite his best efforts, she quickly got a good strike on his left arm, and another one into the side where the Kingslayer had already left his mark. The women of Bear Island really knew how to beat someone up with a mace, and even the tawny ones, that had a wooden head that was once wrapped in leather, hurt like the seven hells. He was glad that it remained at the 2 painful hits, as he quickly found his rhythm again, and went on the offensive himself. At first, Daisy managed to block all of his strikes expertly, but eventually, fatigue caused her to slip up briefly, which he immediately capitalized on, disarming her with a strike from the flat of his blade to her wrist. 7. "Do you yield?" Jon asked, breathing heavily. "Aye, Jon, I yield," Daisy nodded. "Well done." "Thank you," he grinned. "You as well, though. Never seen the Greatjon so eager to yield." "He was already beaten bloody when I got to him," she shrugged. Still, a few knocks to the gut made him quickly re-evaluate his will to keep on fighting. "Now, however, it is time for you to get your prize." "Always glad to take money from the Southrons," Jon laughed. "I'll see you later, Daisy." "Aye, later," she said, and also walked from the arena, after they had shaken hands. "And the winner of the melee is Lord Jon Frost of Queenscrown," the herald announced to thunderous cheers. Jon made sure to wave plenty in every direction, but eventually turned towards the section of the stands where both the king and his family sat. All of them had wide grins on their faces, with Arya, Bran, and Rickon excitedly jumping up and down. Lyra shot him a wide grin as well, and Robb looked proud of him. Even his father had a smile on his face. "A fine show, Jon," the king boomed. "The prize is yours." "I thank you, Your Grace," Jon said and bowed, ignoring the informal way the king addressed him. "And well earned it was, seldom do we see such a display of swordsmanship. And you certainly gave the Kingslayer a good thrashing." "Ha!" Next to the king, the queen looked between him and Jon with so much hatred in her gaze that Jon decided to sit as far away for her this evening as possible. "You are sitting next to me tonight, lad. Now, go get yourself cleaned up, you'll get your prize at the feast." "Well, fuck." Much to his relief, the queen was indisposed for the evening. But he still had to sit next to the king, instead of Lyra. "You have to tell me where you learned to fight like that, lad," the king said, munching on a piece of chicken. "When I still lived in Winterfell, I was trained by Sir Roderick Castle, the master at arms here, Your Grace. After I moved to Queenscrown, I had to find another to train with. Ironically, the man I eventually chose, was also named Roderick. The man fought with you on Pike. He is a devil with a shield in hand, and has taught me much," Jon said. "Well, they certainly did a good job training you," the king said. "I've never seen someone defeat the Kingslayer so soundly. And I have not forgotten my promise. Let's see. If you didn't already own Queenscrown, I would have given you some castle, there are plenty of empty ones around. But from what I hear, you are doing a fine job up there. You also already have a wife, a pretty one too. But I guess, you can't go wrong with more gold, can you? I wouldn't say no, your grace, Jon said. Ha! That's the spirit. Since I enjoyed the show so much, lad, I'll double the prize. Is that all right with you? Double the prize. That was 40,000 gold dragons. The king was truly insane. More than fine, your grace, Jon answered, keeping his thoughts to himself. I thank you for this gift. Bah! It's nothing, the king said. You already provided all of this food. At first, I thought that I would have to go on a hunt to have something proper to eat, but this is all excellent. I am glad you enjoy it, your grace, Jon said. He left out the fact that he had already been paid by his father. But gold was gold. And now he would have a very comfortable reserve for the winter. Luckily, the king soon decided to intermingle with some of the willing women, leaving Jon to go to the lower tables to seek out Sir Beric. He briefly passed Lyra, and promised that they would spend some time in the peacefulness of their own chambers. He found the Lightning Lord, sitting with his squire and Thoros of Myr towards the back of the room. Do you mind if I join you? Jon asked. Ah, the champion of the day, Thoros laughed. Come, sit down. Do you need a drink? Not tonight, Jon shook his head. But probably tomorrow, after Sir Barristan knocks me to the dirt. Well said, Sir Beric said. You already know Thoros here, but you haven't met my squire, correct? Well, then. This is Lord Edric Dane of Starfall. Jon Frost, a pleasure, Jon said, and offered his hand to the young Dornishman. A pleasure to meet you, too, my lord. Did you know we are milk brothers? Edric blurted out. Milk brothers? Jon asked. I am afraid that I don't know what you mean. We had the same wet nurse, Edric explained. Wyler, a servant at Starfall. Really? I did not know that, Jon said. Well, then, it appears we already have something in common. Some say she is your mother, Edric continued, slightly more quiet. At that, Jon had to laugh. Seeing Edric's ashamed face, he felt sorry immediately. I am sorry, I did not mean to laugh at you. I was simply surprised that people speculated about my parentage all the way in Dorne. Well, you are the naturally son of the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms, Sir Beric said. And that sort of thing gets people's imagination going. Well, you can stop torturing the poor woman, she is not my mother. Mine died in childbirth, Jon said. But her being my wet nurse, I can believe. I was born in Dorne, after all. But we are not here to talk about my mother, he quickly said, thinking he might have given away enough already. Lord Dane, I hear you are also sometimes referred to as Ned, the same as my father. Yes, my lord. Please, call me Jon. Only if you call me Edric, or Ned. Seeing as I now have a nephew, also named Edric, and I don't call my father by his name, I am going to settle for Ned, Jon said. This is getting confusing already. Then I think we can all stick to our given names, Thoros said, and Sir Beric nodded. Very well, Thoros, Beric, Ned. Jon nodded to them all. I've been meaning to ask, what brings you all this way? Blackhaven is not really that close to Winterfell. That, it is not, Beric agreed. But we were in King's Landing, when the king announced his departure, and soon the announcement of the tourney followed. And seeing as both Ned and myself always wanted to see the North, we decided to attend. Well, you are certainly welcome here, Jon said. If you wish, I would even invite you to Queenscrown. It is under a fortnight away, and we have plenty of rooms to spare. We could talk in a much less crowded environment, and the valleys in autumn are truly beautiful. Ned seemed excited at the idea, and Beric also did not look too adverse. You could also visit the Wall, Jon said. It is about a day's ride away, on a fast horse. And who can say that they have been from the Wall to Starfall? Besides, I have planned on visiting after this tourney anyway. As my wife and I both have family serving in the Night's Watch, we thought it way past time to see them again. Now that truly sounds like as good a reason as any, doesn't it? Thoros said. I will sadly have to go back south, but you, Beric, I would not recommend you let this chance go. If you are already in the north, you might as well go all the way, Beric laughed. What do you say, Ned? I would very much like to go, the young lord nodded. Only, is it very cold? At the Wall? John laughed. But we have hot springs in Queenscrown, and the castle is always nice and warm. You can even swim in the lake, it's surprisingly warm as well. Besides, I can give you plenty of warmly clothing. My good mother, Mage Mormont, keeps sending us plenty of warm pelts. That sounds like a wonderful idea, I could use a better cloak, Beric jested. When do you plan on leaving? In 3 days. I am still a new lord, and Queenscrown is constantly growing. In the last 5 moons alone, we had an estimated 100,000 people moving to my lands. That requires a lot of organization. And I have already been away too long. Then in return for your hospitality, perhaps I can offer a bit of advice in return, Beric said. But 3 days sounds good. I would welcome anything you might be able to teach me, John said. And we will talk again before we depart. We may even meet in the joust, no matter how unlikely it is that I beat Sir Barristan. From what I saw, you ride well, Ned said. Riding I can do, John said. The lance is my worry. I only took it up again less than a fortnight ago, after neglecting it for years. You could have fooled me, Beric said. I truly believe you might stand a chance. Well then, we shall see, shan't we? John laughed. But for that I need my rest, so I am afraid I have to leave you now. It was a true pleasure talking to you, Thoros, Beric, Ned. Likewise they all said in unison, causing them all to laugh. Finally he was able to go to Lyra in their chambers, and fall into bed. He had almost forgotten his bruises Daisy gave him, until Lyra tried to snuggle up to him. She managed to perfectly hit him in the side where a massive blue fleck reminded him of today's events. So for this night, they swapped position, and he tucked himself against her chest, and soon found his sleep. Notes. As always, I hope you liked it. Happy Smiley. Comments are always appreciated, especially feedback on my dialogue and writing style. Until next time. Happy Smiley. Chapter 10, Tilts and Treasures. Summary. John and Rob compete in the final day of the joust. Notes. And here is the second part of the tourney. As always, I hope you enjoy it. Also, thank all of you for your kind words and for simply reading. It means a lot. Happy Smiley. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Lyra Frost. Unlike the day before, John awoke before her. In their swapped position, she herself awoke from his shifting within her embrace. Good morning, love, she murmured, with her eyes still closed. She could feel him start to get up. Immediately she missed his warm presence. You can stay a few minutes longer, John told her, there is no rush today. Then why are you getting up? I want to break my fast. You can ask someone to bring it to us. Since when is my wife so lazy? John chuckled. Since she is the one having to carry another person within her. Point taken. If you get us something, make sure it isn't something with bacon. That sent my stomach for a spin the last time. I'll be right back, John said, and she heard the door close behind him. She drifted off for another few moments, before John returned with the food. She groaned and finally got up, instinctively holding her hand to her slightly swollen belly as she did so. She threw on a light linen shirt and a pair of breeches, before sitting down at the small table John was waiting for her. What did you get? She asked. Not bacon, he smirked, to which she smiled at him in thanks. I wasn't sure what you wanted, but I got you some chicken, plum preserve, yogurt, honey, and some bread. Sounds lovely, she said, and began to tuck into the food. It tasted lovely, especially knowing that half of it came from their lands. So what was your little on top that the king promised? She had not gotten the can to talk with him last night. They both had just wanted to sleep. At first, he wanted to give me a castle, and a wife, before he noticed that I already had wonderful things in those regards. He smiled at her, which she returned. So he settled on doubling the reward from the melee. You are joking, she said, almost forgetting that her mouth was stuffed with chicken. No, I am not, John laughed. So we will go home with 40,000 dragons more than we came here with. Not to forget the coin for the food, from my father. That amount of gold was absurd. They could easily build multiple smaller castles with that. Queen's Crown had been so expensive because of the massive bridge, and the fact that the castle was on an island. But even that had maybe cost 35,000, at most. The rest had gone into developing the town and lands. Now we only need you to win the joust, and we will be the richest house in the north. The Mandaealis would have us probably still beat, as well as my father. The 500,000 after the rebellion has certainly not vanished overnight, Jon said. And I don't know if I can beat Sabaristan. The others, maybe, but him. Well, for all it is worth, I believe in you, she said. Jon smiled one of his rare genuine smiles, something he reserved mostly for her, and always made her feel special. Robb will certainly have it easier. I don't know who made the list, but he will face largely inexperienced jousters until the final. Whilst Sabaristan and Sir Jaime will face off in the first round. If I didn't know any better I might have suspected Lady Stark meddling in some way, but apparently, the groups were drawn in such a way, that none of the favorites would meet on the first day. Beyond that it was random. It doesn't matter, Jon said. I will do my best, as will Robb. And hey, second place will still get 5 and 10,000, so should he get to the final only to lose, it will have still been worth the effort for him. I'm almost certain, he cares more about the crown of winter roses than the gold. He is a Stark, your father still gives him all the money he could want, she said. My father is not as generous as you might think, Jon said. Sure, he gave us plenty of gold for Queen's Crown, but that was for the benefit of the North. If Robb had some worthy project, like constructing a holding at Sea Dragon Point, for example, my father might give him the money. But if it is for spending on baubles and drink, he is not so understanding. Theon kept learning that the hard way, or rather, he still has not learned it. Well, your father is much more responsible than most. He is a good man. They continued to eat in silence for a bit, before Jon spoke again. I invited some people to Queen's Crown. And who did you invite? Someone nice, I hope, she said. Sir Beric Dondarrion, and his squire Edric Dane, more commonly called Ned. Well, that won't get confusing at all, she laughed. Any particular reason? Jon sighed. Beric is nice, but I honestly did it for Ned. His uncle was my birth father's closest friend. And he died trying to protect me. I feel somewhat responsible for that. So I thought, I could show him the North a bit more, the Wall, even. He is still a young lad, he likes the adventure probably. That is nice of you, she said, and meant it. Leave it to Jon to try to make up for something he had no part in. I am sure he will enjoy it. He seemed to quite like the idea. Besides, building relationships with other lords is important. Both Beric and Ned are lords in their own right, of quite notable houses at that. Maybe we can even strike up some trade. Now you sound way too responsible, she giggled. Let's stick with doing a little lad a favor. Let's, Jon agreed with a chuckle. He also told me that we were milk brothers, as in we had the same wet nurse. Really? I had the same response, he said. And I believe him. The Tower of Joy is not too far from Starfall, and it makes sense for Sir Arthur to have gotten help from his home. Some even think her to be my mother. What did you say? That my mother died in childbirth. It is the truth, and leaves the poor woman alone. I wouldn't want her to get into trouble, should someone try to get at me. I hadn't thought of that, she admitted. I would have to see that happen. Apparently there are quite a few rumors going around about my birth. Once, even though Ned's Aunt Ashura was my mother, that is one of the more popular theories, anyway. It would be so much simpler, if you could just be honest about your parentage, she sighed. We wouldn't need to worry about our child's looks, you wouldn't need to sneak into the crypts, and replace those weird feathers the king keeps placing on your mother's statue, and we could live without any lies. That would be a wonderful thing. Especially the feather thing. Where does he keep getting those? She admitted had to laugh at that. Jon, I am being serious. I know, he said, and looked down. But that could only ever happen should someone friendly towards the Targaryens be on the Iron Throne, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. Maybe your aunt will try to take it, she mused. I both hope she will, and dread what would happen, should she try, he admitted. Do you think your father would march against her? If I'm honest, I don't know, Jon said. He would certainly not jump at the opportunity to go to war for either side, of that I am sure. And you? I would not fight against my family. Either side. If my father were to stay out of it, then I would march, even if he did not. Or at least offer my services in whatever capacity. If he did, then I would not join him. I will not become a kinslayer. I will stay by your side, whatever you choose, she reassured him. I know, love, he smiled gratefully, and squeezed her hand. The same goes for you. She returned the smile, before turning it into a smirk. You know, we still have some time, she said. Now? Jon asked. Well, it has been a couple of days. This better not cost me the joust. Jon grinned and pounced on her, throwing her over his shoulder. She let out a very undignified squeak, as he tossed her onto the bed, and quickly removed any articles of clothing they might have been wearing. The stands were once again filled with countless people. There had not been such an event in the North for decades, if not centuries, and everyone within distance had come to see the spectacle. She was once again sitting with her good family, my mother and sisters sitting some distance away. But she, as the good daughter of Lord Stark, was expected to sit near to him. Next to her, sat Arya and Aelys. Both Robb and Jon had already made their way to the tent where the contestants awaited their turn. When is it starting? Arya asked, ever impatient. As soon as the king sees it fit to join us, she said. He is certainly not known for his punctuality. I want to see Jon win. As do I, Lyra chuckled. He would crown you, wouldn't he? He promised as such. But for that, he would need to beat Robb, and I think your other brother might have similar intentions as Jon, she said, and shot a knowing look towards Aelys. Aelys only blushed slightly. Robb's only goal is to reach the final, she said. He said that he did not need to win some tourney to show me how much he loved me. That is actually really sweet, Lyra said. Though I'm sure, the pocket change of at least 5 and 10,000 gold dragons has no part in it. Oh, it absolutely does, Aelys laughed. He wants to build a little getaway tower in the Wolf's Wood. Lord Stark was not adverse to the idea, but would not simply throw money at it. Not with so much else needing it more pressingly. So Robb hoped he could use his winnings to do it himself. You really are sickly in love, aren't you? Lyra giggled. Well, if Lord Stark is reluctant to build a new tower, why don't you refurbish the one already there? What do you mean? Aelys asked. There is a quite run-down tower, about a day's ride west from here. Jon showed it to me when we were hunting one time. Oh, I know the one. Arya chimed in. Jon showed it to me as well. Nymeria liked it there. It would certainly be easier to convince Lord Stark to rebuild something that is already there, Aelys agreed. If you need people to help refurbishing an old tower, we have accumulated quite the array of experts, Lyra said. I will certainly keep it in mind, Aelys smiled. How is Edric doing? Lyra asked, changing the topic. I hope you have been able to spend enough time with him, despite all of this commotion. It has been a bit tough, Aelys admitted. Though, I spend as much time as possible with him. But soon all of this will be over, and we can go back to our normal routine. You deserve some peace and quiet after all of this, Lyra said. With that, they were interrupted by the king finally making his appearance. They all rose to greet him, which he completely ignored, as he forgot to allow them to sit down again. Lord Stark had to whisper in his ear to do so. The first tilt of the day would immediately be Jon. He was up against some knight in service to House Royce, Sir Eorwick, if she remembered correctly. As the two rode out, she could see Jon in all of his glory again. He certainly looked impressive. Mounted on his mighty destrier, Shadow, and armored in his suit of patterned steel, with the engravings of winter roses and direwolves, as well as the white and blue sash, displaying their house's coat of arms. His helmet also had a small plume of white and blue. Was it a bit excessive by northern standards? Yes. Did it make him appear majestic and impressive? Also yes. He still looked sparely decorated by Southron standards, so it was not like it was over the top. It was simplistic but well made, and it looked so good on him. He had certainly come out of his only wearing black phase. She was not worried for him in this match. Not really, at any rate. She knew, he was almost unparalleled on a horse, having only gotten better since she taught him all she knew about skin changing. His special bond with Shadow allowed him to purely focus on the lance and shield, whilst having full control over his mount, something that no one else could do. Maybe Robb, as it seemed like all of the Stark children were wargs, but he had not been taught by anyone, so he might be limited to his bond with Grey Wind. Also Jon's opponent was no great rider. The man had gotten lucky, as the group he had been put in, was largely terrible. But now, he was up against Jon, someone that was very much not terrible. Jon and Sir Eowick saluted each other, and with the sound of the horn, they rode forth, cheered on by the thousands of onlookers. Next to her, Arya was jumping up and down in her seat, eagerly watching her brother ride. She could not blame her, as it was indeed beautiful to look at Jon galloping down the tiltyard. He sat much more elegantly in his saddle than the opponent, and seemed to almost glide. They did not meet in the middle, as Jon and Shadow were much faster. Instead, they met way to right of the royal section. She could see the splinters flying away, from Jon having smashed his lance into his opponent's shield. Surprisingly, Sir Eowick managed to hold firm, and not fall, even though it was clear that he had come close to doing so. The blow Jon had taken in return had been minimal, and did not even shake him slightly. Arya and the crowd were going wild. The Northerners loved Jon, especially after he had won the melee, and beat the Kingslayer so soundly, and now they were cheering him on. Jon took another lance, and soon they were off again. This time, Jon did not ride at full gallop the entire time, and only sped up towards the end. As such they met much closer to the middle, and Lyra had a wonderful view of Jon's lance catching Sir Eowick straight in the chest, sending him flying off of his horse, and into the dirt below. She cheered with Jon's family, and the rest of the audience, even getting out of her seat. He was certainly presenting himself to the realm as someone that was not to be underestimated. Jon quickly discarded his broken lace, and rode towards Sir Eowick, helping him up, which gained another round of cheers. The people loved good sportsmanship. With a bow towards the king, and a quick wink in her direction, he rode off, back towards the competitor's tent. The next match was worthy of being a final. Sir Barristan the Bold, against Sir Jaime Lannister the Kingslayer. Both clad in the white armor of the Kingsguard, they certainly looked the part of being the most famous, or infamous, knights currently alive. And they certainly lived up to expectations. They rode extremely well, their lances being steady and true, without any of the shaking some of the competitors had shown on the first day. They met directly in the middle of the yard, both shattering their lances on the opponent's shield, but both remained in the saddle. On the next pass Sir Barristan managed to get the better hit in, as the Kingslayer's lance was slightly too far to the right, glancing off harmlessly. Sir Barristan's was true, and hit Sir Jaime's shield straight on, though it did not shatter. The third pass was the opposite, with Sir Jaime having thrust his lance just ever so slightly farther, allowing him to shatter it on the Bold's shield, before being hit himself. On the fourth, both managed to break their lances against each other again. Lyra did not want to know how much their arms were hurting. None of the blows looked light, and they had already taken quite a few blows each. But the Kingslayer was probably even more sore than the Bold, as Jon's onslaught had surely left some marks behind. Whether or not that was the deciding factor, she did not know. But on the seventh tilt, Sir Barristan finally managed to hit Sir Jaime straight on the chest, lifting him from the saddle. Again, the crowd erupted in applause, the Bold being the definite favorite out of the two Kingsguard. After the field had been cleared, the next two contestants entered. One was Sir Beric Dondarrion, the man Jon had invited to Queenscrown, the other being Sandor Clegane, the Hound. If she was being honest, she did not think that Sir Beric had any chance against the hulking mass that was the Hound, but since Jon seemed to like the man, she rooted for him anyway. Soon enough, the two clashed against each other. She was surprised to see that Sir Beric was still sitting strong in the saddle. He had even managed to break his lance against the Hound's shield, even though the man remained seated as well. In contrast, the Hound's lance had not even made contact. The second pass was similar, though this time, the Hound managed to get a hit in, that nearly threw Sir Beric from the saddle. On the third, the unthinkable happened, and the Hound got knocked from his horse. He was not sent flying, as others had been previously, but he still fell, leaving Sir Beric as the victor. I did not expect that to happen, she said to no one in particular. I had the great Jon boasting about beating the Hound bloody in the melee. Maybe he was simply too hurt, Arya said. Probably, she acknowledged. Any other reasons did not make sense. She doubted that Jon would invite someone dishonorable, and since the Hound was not claiming any foul play either, that was the most likely explanation. The next round was between two knights from the Reach that she did not care for on the slightest. Their lance work was acceptable, but their riding left much to be desired. It was unlikely that, should Jon defeat Sir Barristan, he would meet either of them. But the round after that was interesting again. Robb was riding against Sir Wendell Wentwater, the second son of Lord Wentwater, from the Crown Lands. Nervous? Lyra asked Aelys next to her. A bit, Aelys said. But I know he can beat him. Of course he will. Arya said, ever the sternest advocate for her brothers. Their statements were proven true shortly after, when Robb unseated his opponent on the second pass. Again, the crowd was cheering loudly for the future Lord of Winterfell. Robb waved to the people, bowed to the king, and flashed a brilliant smile towards Aelys. The next matches were less interesting, but much to Aelys' delight, her brother, Harryon, managed to advance, the same as the small Jon. Though Harryon would face off against Robb in the next round, which conflicted Aelys slightly. Lyra had felt similarly with Daisy and Jon facing each other at the end of the melee. But in the end she had been happy with the outcome, and especially the fact that Jon had walked away with fewer bruises than he usually did whenever he sparred with her sister. Finally, the match she had both been anticipating and dreading came. Jon against Sir Barristan. Honestly, she could only hope that the two Kingsguard had softened each other up enough, for Jon to stand a chance. The two saluted each other in acknowledgement, put down their visors, and took up their positions. Lyra could feel her hair properly beating in her chest. She did not even realize that Arya had taken her hand into her own, and was clutching it tightly for comfort. With the blast of the horn, Jon and Sir Barristan rode forth. Everything seemed to happen much more slowly than with previous matches. But this was not just any match, this was Jon, her Jon, against the most legendary knight alive. Sure, he was not undefeated, but he was still the bold. She held her breath as the two got closer to each other, and she dared not to blink, otherwise she might miss something. After what felt like an age, the two crashed into each other, both shattering their lances, sending the wooden splinters flying. She let out her breath, when she was sure that Jon would remain in the saddle. Only then did she notice Arya's hand, and gave it a gentle squeeze. He handled that one well enough, she said quietly to herself. He is the best. Arya declared next to her, and she was not quite sure if it was in response to her previous statement. The second pass was not any less nerve-wracking. Perhaps, it was even more so. Jon rode again, like a man possessed, thundering down the tiltyard, and smashing his lance into the bolt's shield, whilst being hit in return. Both their lances broke upon impact, once more. The lad can certainly ride. Ha! She completely ignored the king, and only focused on the next pass. Once more, the two came at each other, but this time only Jon managed to get a proper hit in, shattering his third lance. She absent-mindedly clutched Arya's hand even tighter. Jon was doing so well. The fourth pass was another equal exchange, and Lyra did not want to imagine how much their arms must have hurt. Now he'll win, Arya said next to her, and she could only hope. With the signal, the fifth pass was opened, and Jon rushed forth on Shadow once more. Like many previous times, Jon did not meet his opponent in the middle, but quite a bit to the side, so fast was he. She held her breath when she saw Jon standing up in his saddle and leaning forward, gathering even more momentum and reach. Time seemed to stop for her, when she saw the explosion of splinters, but it was not Jon that was lifted from the saddle. Sir Barristan was flung quite some distance by the force of Jon's lance shattering upon his breastplate. And Jon remained on Shadow. She immediately jumped from her seat, shouting at the top of her lungs, the same as the rest of the Stark siblings. Jon had won. Against Sir Barristan the Bold. It was not yet the overall victory, but it might as well be. The sounds of the cheers was almost deafening. A son of Winterfell had defeated the most famous of the Kingsguard in a joust. Jon was quickly by Sir Barristan's side, helping him up. Neither of them seemed to be seriously injured, which caused much relief to come over her. I knew it. I knew he would win. Arya was jumping up and down next to her. He won was all she managed to het out in her disbelief. Jon is the best, Arya continued happily. He will win against the rest as well, you'll see. At this point, Lyra was almost starting to believe it as well. Jon and Sabaristan were still talking a bit on the field, but soon they both waved to the crowd, and Jon especially towards them, and eventually made for the tent, once more. She was still feeling a bit lightheaded as the next match occurred, but was happy to see that Saberic won in the end. Now, it was time for Robb to ride against his good brother, Haryon. So Alis, who are you rooting for? Lyra asked her with a smirk. You are making me choose. Alis groaned. If you have to know, Robb is the one I am rooting for. Haryon occasionally needs to be knocked down a peg. It'll do him good. Well, then, let us see if your husband or brother will come out of this victorious, Lyra said, and turned to watch the clash between the two. She was not ashamed to admit that she was not nearly as heavily invested in this match, compared to Jon's. She liked Robb, he was nice, and funny, and she would consider him a good friend. But Jon was hers, and she was his. They belonged together, and him riding and winning against the bold was still unbelievable to her. In the end, it turned out that Alis' wish became reality. After 3 passes, Robb managed to unhorse the Karstark heir, and advanced ever closer towards the finals. After him, the Smalljan managed to win against some knight from the Riverlands, she did not know, making him Robb's next opponent. Finally, it was Jon's turn again, this time against Saberic. It would certainly not be as spectacular as against the bold, but she was still lightly nervous. Hopefully, Jon was not too injured to win. He did not look it, he carried himself as ever, but men never allowed themselves to show weakness, so in reality he might be dying underneath that armor, though she heavily doubted it. After the greetings, Jon and Saberic got into position, and rode forth with the signal. Now it was obvious that Jon was not seriously injured. He thundered towards his opponent, challenging Saberic for the title of the Lightning Lord with the speed he was going at. Beric managed to last 3 rounds under the assault, before he too was lifted from the saddle. Jon was immediately by his side, helping him up, and shaking hands. They were clearly laughing together at something, but with a wave, they both left the field. Jon was in the final. And if Robb won his match now, it would be the 2 brothers matched against each other. Though the Smalljan would be no easy foe to best. Despite his name, the man was almost as tall as his father, the Great Jon, and towered over pretty much anyone else. Lyra could see that Alis was getting more and more nervous next to her, as the 2 entered the yard, and eventually took up their positions. Robb will win this, she said to Alis. He is much better with a lance than Smalljan, and rides almost as well as Jon. I think so, too, Alis said, though there was some doubt in her voice. This was definitely Robb's most difficult matchup up to this point. On the first pass, he managed to hit the Smalljan almost perfectly, sending the splinters flying, and the man barely shifted in the saddle. The second pass was much the same. On the third, the Smalljan got in a powerful hit as well, almost losing Robb the match, but he held on, somehow. On the fourth pass it was Robb's time to shine again, managing to hit the Smalljan squarely in the chest, and whilst not sending him flying, caused him to fall from the saddle. Robb was in the final. I am not sure whether to rejoice or curse at this outcome, Alis said. At least you'll get your tower either way, Lyra chuckled. That is a good point, at least Alis also gave a small laugh. But as much as it pains me to say it, I don't believe he can defeat Jon. Without trying to let my favoritism show too much, I think you are right, Lyra said. What do you think, Arya? Why are you dragging me into this? The little wolf complained. I think this is great. Either way, my brother will be the winner. That is one way to look at it, Alis said. But Jon will win, Arya added with a smirk, at which Alis protested in fake outrage, causing them all to laugh. Well then, this is it, Lyra said eventually, as the 2 brothers rode out and took up their positions. She could see that both had determined grins on their faces. They had not trained against each other for exactly this outcome, instead choosing to only train on targets. They saluted each other, pulled down their visors, readied themselves, and with the sound of the horn, they were off. They both galloped towards each other at neck-breaking speed, holding their lances steady, and readied for the impact. Splinters flew everywhere when they met, both having shattered their lances on the other one's shield, but they both rode on. On the second pass, the same occurred again, as on the third. Neither wanted to be defeated now. As they met for the fourth time, Rob managed to slip past Jon's shield and hit him in the chest. It was not a clean strike, only managing to glance Jon on the side, but it was enough to make him slip in the saddle. Only for Shadow to make a sharp turn under Jon, causing him to be thrusted upright again, and letting him ride on. Gasps and cheers could be heard form around the stands. Nobody had ever seen such a show of horsemanship. Lyra could only smirk. Of course Jon would use everything to win, short of actually cheating. She did not know if it was Shadow who had acted on her own based on their shared bond, or if it had been Jon, quickly taking control, but she definitely was impressed either way. "Did you see that?" Arya screamed next to her. "How did he do that?" "That was amazing. I wish I could do that." That was quite something," Lyra agreed. To her right, she could hear the king be equally excited. Not that she cared much for his opinion, but it still filled her with pride to see Jon get so much recognition. When everyone had calmed somewhat, and Rob and Jon had taken up positions once more, the signal for the fifth pass was given. They both rode again at full speed, the manes of their horses fluttering in the wind. This time it was Jon who managed to get past Rob's shield, only his hit was much better aimed. Rob was lifted from the saddle and fell onto the ground. Jon had won. Before anyone could even cheer, Jon was already by Rob's side, helping him up, and making sure that everything was as it should be. The two brothers embraced, and the crowd went wild. As did she and Arya, and even Alis was clapping along. She did not seem overly disappointed that it was not Rob who had won. Both Rob and Jon mounted up again, the fact that their horses had come to them without any prompting, seemingly lost on everyone except Lyra. Apparently Rob was not as harmless as she first thought. The two waved to the crowd, and soon some servant came towards Jon with the crown of winter roses. Jon took it but did not immediately ride forward, instead he held out his arm, in order to silence the crowd. "My lords, ladies, your grace," he began, "it is truly an honor to be the winner of the tourney celebrating the birth of my dear nephew Edric, the son of my brother, and dearest friend, Robb Stark. Had the little man of the hour been present, I would have very much been tempted to crown him." This earned a few chuckles and laughter from the audience. "But alas, for him the prospect of sleep is currently much more enticing than any joust," Jon said, garnering him a few more laughs. But with that, he turned towards her, and her heart skipped a beat. "But it is my utmost pleasure to crown my dear lady wife the queen of love and beauty of this Toruni," Jon declared and rode up to her, placing the crown into her hands, before leaning in for a kiss, which she eagerly returned. More cheers and applause erupted as they kissed, and she put the crown of roses onto her head, with a wide smile on her face. Jon Frost. How in the seven hells he had done it, he had no idea. But there had been something that kept him going, kept him in the saddle, and kept him taking those countless hits to his shield arm, which was now hurting quite considerably. That stunt with Shadow near the end had not even been intentional, but with the connection they shared, his trusty mare had acted quickly enough to keep him upright. "I hope I have not upset you too greatly by winning," he said to Robb, as they were back in Winterfell, enjoying a brief moment to themselves. Lyra and Alis were taking care of Edric, leaving Robb and Jon to talk. "Not at all," Robb said with a large smile. "You beat Sir Barristan. After that, you certainly deserve it. Besides, I came the closest to knocking you down, I almost did, had it not been for the lucky intervention of Shadow." "There was no luck involved," Jon said. "Oh, I know," Robb smirked. "Do you think you are the only one who has discovered they can walk? You can skin change, too?" Jon asked. "I always thought you only had connections with the direwolves." "Oh, Grey Wind and I share a much closer bond than I have with any other animal," Robb said. "But I can do it, too. Lyra taught me some years ago," Jon admitted. "I did not use it in the joust, Shadow acted on her own, but I am sure that without the bond, it would have been my ass in the dirt many times over." "Lyra is one as well?" Robb asked, astonished. "Aye, she and her sisters. Have you not heard about Fluffy?" "Fluffy? Who is that? Her snow bear that lives close to Queen's Crown. She named a snow bear Fluffy. In her defense, Lyra was 5 at the time, John said. But she is very fluffy indeed, so the name definitely fits. We even took her and Ghost into town once. The faces were priceless. That I can believe, Rob chuckled. But back to your question, no, you definitely deserve it. And your kind words were also much appreciated. You're welcome. I disliked the king making such an event out of it, and sort of ignoring the actual reason that we are celebrating. So it just felt right to point it out. And Edric is very cute. That he is, Rob smiled. The only thing is that the name gets confusing now. Why is that? Do you know Sir Beric Dondarrion, the knight I faced before you? I have heard of him, Rob said. But I do not know much about him. Well, he is betrothed to Illyria Dane, and has taken his betrothed's nephew as his squire. Edric Dane, the Lord of Starfall, oftentimes referred to as Ned. Oh, I see, Rob laughed. That gets confusing quickly. I invited them both up to Queen's Crown. But since I don't call Father Ned, there is at least some way to properly refer to whomever I want to. At least there is that. But why did you invite them? John sighed. Because of Sir Arthur. He died trying to defend me, even if it was against Father. I feel somewhat responsible for that. So, I wanted to show some kindness to his nephew in return. At one point I even contemplated telling him the truth. Rob only nodded. Will you? I haven't decided yet, John said. First, I plan to go to the wall, as soon as I can, and they will join me. Lyra has her uncle there, I have Uncle Benjen, and the Maester is Aemon Targaryen, a man that is over a century old, but perhaps the only relative from my father's side I will ever be able to meet. Mayhap after that I'll tell him. Do what you think is right, Rob said. If he seems trustworthy and honorable, perhaps it would be kind to tell him the truth. As it stands, Sir Arthur is currently often portrayed as someone who helped kidnap Aunt Lyanna, and held her captive. That is precisely the reason, John said. But that is not a decision for today. You, however, must start to plan where to build that tower of yours. Alis told you. Rob chuckled. No, she told Lyra, and Lyra told me. But I like the idea. A sort of summer hall for the Starks. Winter hall, if you wish. No points for creativity on the name, but sort of along those lines. Well, if you ever need a few people who know stuff about building towers, or renovating old ones, I have the people you are looking for, John said. I'll be sure to remember that, Rob smiled. But first we have to get the damn gold. At the feast, or on the morrow, when is it handed out? There will be some sort of ceremony tonight. But the gold will be handed out tomorrow. Though I think we might need to lend you a few wagons. It's not my fault the king likes to throw money at me, John smirked. But I'll definitely put it to better use than he. That is not particularly difficult, though. True, John chuckled. But I'll be your strongest bannerman yet, you'll see. I never doubted you, Rob laughed, and patted him on the back. And I certainly trust you more than those Dustins, or Ryswells. What a distinctive comparison, my dear brother. Lady Barbary loves the Starks unconditionally, whatever reason might there be for your doubt. John mocked. She loves the Starks as much as everyone loves the phrase, Rob said. But I really am glad to have you by my side, should I need it. Always, John said with resolve. Now, I believe the king awaits, and wants to talk to his new favorite person. John groaned, don't get me started on him. And here I was actually beginning to enjoy the evening. Oh, you know you'll enjoy his company once you're there, Rob said sarcastically. Fuck off, Stark, John laughed. You are simply too easy, Frost, Rob returned. Together they went to the Great Hall, and John readied himself for another evening in the company of his least favorite person in the world. As it turned out, the ceremony had been very small. One major factor of that was, that he had won 2 out of the 3 competitions, so there had only been 2 victors in total. He accepted the praise gladly, even though he still felt somewhat bad about beating Rob in the tourney that was held in his son's honor. What had surprised him, was when the king had asked him to kneel. He wanted to bestow knighthood upon him, to honor his accomplishments, defeating Sir Jaime in the melee, as well as Sir Barristan in the joust, and winning both. He had been conflicted about being knighted by the king. On one hand it was an honor to receive the title by the king, and he would not lie and say that the prospect of being a knight, at least in tile, did not interest him. Had Aemon the Dragon Knight not been one of his childhood idols, even without knowing his true parentage? On the other hand, this was the man that had killed his own father, that had usurped his birthright, not that he wanted it, mind you, but it was the principle that counted. But in the end, he could not have refused the king without causing a major scene, so instead he had asked to be knighted by Sir Barristan. He was one of his childhood heroes as well, and he had fought with his father on the Trident, so he would not feel any conflict in accepting knighthood from him. The king seemed to accept it, and allowed Sir Barristan to knight him in front of all the gathered lords, ladies, and knights in the great hall. He had certainly made a name for himself now. "How does it feel, Sir John?" Lyra smirked, when they were back within their chambers. "Honestly, I don't feel any different," Jon shrugged. "But from being a bastard less than 2 years ago to a lord and knight, is still funny to me in hindsight." "I liked that you asked Sir Barristan to do it," she said, as she was undoing the braids in her hair. "Well, I wasn't exactly thrilled at the prospect of being knighted by the man who killed my father." "That, I can imagine. So, what do you want to do next?" Jon asked as he was undressing, getting ready for bed. "In what regard?" "We have plenty of gold now. Short of behaving like the king, it will last us quite a while, too. Is there anything you've always wanted?" "I quite liked the sound of that bathhouse you once planned," Lyra said, as she got under the covers. That we will definitely have to do," Jon said, as he also got into bed. "Perhaps even 2, one for us, and one for the people. Shouldn't be too difficult to divert some water from the glass gardens. And for the castle? Well, I would like for it to be on our floor, though that would be a bit more difficult. Not to say impossible." "You're right," Jon admitted. "But maybe we can figure something out. Besides, it doesn't need to be water from a hot spring. We could just take water from the lake and heat it with fire." "I'll let you surprise me," she grinned. "As for actually useful things, we could construct some smaller keeps somewhere between Queen's Crown and East Harbour. Doing something responsible with tourney winnings. That is not how the custom goes." "You are correct, though. We should eventually get on that. Only, who would we grant it to?" "Feel free to ask your sisters," he smirked. "They would not do it simply because I would technically rule over them," she laughed. I can see that. But who then? One of Alis brothers maybe. Honestly, I do not know. We would have to be able to trust them, or at least, I would like to properly know them," he sighed. "Theoretically, we do not need to give it to highborns," she thought out loud. "Really? I thought you had to. That was the reason I was legitimized. If the king had to approve every appointment of a lord sworn to a lord, who was in turn sworn to another lord, he would do nothing but sign papers all day," she pointed out. "You are a direct bannerman to House Stark. That is something important. But you would have been able to be granted a keep, even had you been a bastard. The new house would have been more difficult, but I heard that Stannis granted a keep to the smuggler that managed to get some food through the blockade at Storm's End, and he was from Flea Bottom. And he founded a new house as well. You are right, maybe we could do that. I certainly trust most of our servants more than any of those hedge knights, or third sons of some lord I have never heard about that keep coming. We can ask your father, it would probably suffice, if he signed the papers. The Southrons would probably suffer a panic attack, if they knew that we were planning on handing out castles to the small folk," Jon mused. "Let them," she said. "In the end, we are all descendants of someone who was not nobly born." "Well said," he agreed. "One more thing I want to do with the gold, though." "What is it?" "I want to provide a way for anyone who is interested to learn to read and write, somewhere in Queen's Crown. When I visited Owen, his little girl, Falia, reminded me that none of them could read. I would like to change that." Lyra hummed in agreement. "A noble goal. Who would teach them, though? There are plenty of scribes that have been put out of job. Or maybe some noble bastard that received an education, similar to me. There are enough people who could do it." If you handle the construction of the facilities, I'll handle the organization and the people, Lyra said. I like the idea, and I'd like to see it do well. Thank you, love, John said. Now, let us sleep, we have to carry chests filled with gold tomorrow. Good night, love. Fortunately, most guests departed on the next day, leaving Winterfell much less crowded than it had been for the past fortnight. The king would stay another few days, but John did not care. He was leaving on the morrow anyway and would not have to suffer his presence any longer. He spent most of the day organizing the journey back to Queenscrown. The wagons needed to be loaded, especially with the gold, and properly guarded. He was certainly glad that he had 70 Frost Guard with him here. Whilst the north was relatively safe, 70,000 gold dragons was an alluring prospect for many a desperate man. Beric and Ned would join them with the 10 men they had brought with them. They had not yet come up with a proper plan as to when they would leave for the wall, but John wanted to do so as soon as possible. He had already sent a raven some days ago, announcing his intent to visit. Whilst his private reasoning for visiting the wall was his uncle Eamon, John was not sure how many times he would have to add great in front, so he just left them away. He would publicly be there to make a trade deal for food and steel. With all of his plans drawn, and everything stored securely, they left Winterfell as he had planned, and rode north. As Lyra rode beside him, he could not help but smile. Whilst her clothes still covered most of it, she had started to show, and he could not be more happy at the thought of a little child to call their own. Notes. I hope you liked it. Happy Smiley. Next time, we will make a small visit to the wall. There are a surprising amount of uncles up there. Winking Smiley. Chapter 11, Old and New. Summary. John, Lyra, Ned, and Beric return to Queenscrown, and make a visit to Castle Black. Notes. Thank you so much for continuing to read this story. And a very special thanks to Ascalon451, who made this awesome version of the House Frost coat of arms. You are amazing. Happy Smiley. https://www.deviantart.com/jmile-conquistador/house-frost-of-955466459. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. John Frost. Their trip back to Queenscrown had been largely uneventful, though that was not necessarily a bad thing. He much preferred a calm journey to one where they would have had to defend their party from bandits and thieves. He had largely talked and japed with Beric and Ned during the ride, and spent all of the time in the evenings with his wife. He liked Ned. The lad was about 4 years his junior, and was polite as a man could be. His initial uncertainty about John and Beric's relaxed behavior was soon replaced with a lively young man who certainly was promising with the blade. They had developed into a routine of sparring in the mornings, before setting out for the day. Spending the entire day in the saddle could be exhausting, but getting a few rounds in before, helped relax their stiff limbs, and made it more bearable. They all sparred with one another and with the Frost Guard. Having variation in one's training partners was always a good thing, and it seemed as though there were quite a few tricks which Ned had picked up on. Beric had certainly done a good job with his training, so far, but the Lord of Blackhaven was only half a decade older than John, so he did not have that much experience himself. Ned trained with a great sword, well, a bastard sword currently, but he was still young, and for his current size, it was pretty much equal to a great sword. No doubt, the young Lord of Starfall trained with Dawn in mind. The legendary blade, forged from a fallen star, was the dream of many a Dane, though it was not simply passed down. One needed to be an exceptional swordsman to be granted the sword, along with the title Sword of the Morning. In the short time, Ned had considerably improved, and was even beating some of the guard. And since John had largely taken his elite with him, that was saying something. John looked forward to introducing him to Roderick. The gruff old man had a certain way of drawing out the best from his students, and depending on how long Beric and Ned stayed, he would certainly work his magic on Ned as well. After about a fortnight they finally approached Queenscrown. Some of the wagons had held then up, as a wheel broke, but the delay was not too severe. "Are you ready to see Queenscrown, Ned?" John asked. "It probably won't match Starfall in beauty, but if I do say so myself, it has its own charms." I have come to find that in regards to beauty, I have been quite spoiled by my own home. Ned laughed. John did not miss the eye. It seemed that the north had already left its mark, which amused him greatly. But I read that even the good Queen Alysanne chose to stop by on her visit to the north. More likely due to the lack of comfort at the wall, Lyra said. Even back then, the watch was not what it should be. And as a queen, I would prefer a warm bed in Queen's Crown over the cold of Castle Black any day, even in the old Holdfast. Yes, I heard about the extensive construction you did, Beric said. How close are you to completing it? That depends. We are continuously working on different things, John said. The previous Holdfast has been expanded and made into a proper castle, with more buildings, a proper wall, and a bridge connecting it to the town. All of that is complete. The town is our eternal project, or at least that is what it feels like. The outer walls should be finished soon, if they have not been already, and the moat has turned the town into an island itself. What is ongoing are the glass gardens, as well as new houses for the people. You have certainly been busy, Beric said. That we have, Lyra agreed. I am looking forward to having the town complete. The remaining projects are other people's business. They rode for a few more moments before Queen's Crown came into view. You have been busy, indeed, Beric said, and John felt quite a bit of pride at the impressed expression of his face. The town was looking ever more lively, with smoke coming out of the countless chimneys, and people bustling in the streets. Even from so far away, he could see the eastern gate being filled with people going about their day. The walls had been finished, and by the looks of things, so had the drawbridges, or at least the eastern one, as the other gates could not be seen from the main road. It was no old town, but it was a definite center of trade, as many wagons and carts were coming and going, likely selling the latest harvest, or buying some of the more finer wares that were not available in the smaller towns and villages. Hells, even the people from lands of the Umbers, Carstarks, and Glovers came to Queen's Crown, as they had some crafts, and tradesmen that were not found for leagues around. I did not expect it to be so large, Ned said. For the northernmost holding in the realm, I expected something a bit more desolate. Empty. Cold. John smirked. Well, yes, Ned admitted. This is more populated than most of the towns in Dawn or the Stormlands. We do take certain pride in that, Lyra smiled. But these lands are deceptively fertile, and now that it is almost winter, we are still getting some harvests in. The people live where they have food and shelter. And we provide that. How many live in Queen's Crown? Beric asked. With that many people coming and going, it must be quite a few. As everywhere, the vast majority of people live in the surrounding lands, John said. There have been countless villages springing up all over the place, though we tend to point out suitable locations beforehand. And whilst the last rough census has been a while, my best estimate would be somewhere between 10 and 20,000 for the town itself, and more than 100,000 within a day's ride. That is an impressive number, Beric said. Mine own lands are not as densely populated, or at least within the immediate surroundings of Blackhaven. You still have us beat in total numbers, most likely, John said. We only have 2 other larger holdings so far, both ports, on both coasts with smaller populations. The rest of the land is only villages and smaller towns without much direct governance, as it is too far out. We have planned for about 2 to 4 more holdings, but do not have the appropriate men to govern them. Besides the fact that their seats would have to be constructed first, and we did not want to throw money at it ourselves. A wise choice, Beric acknowledged. I assume the Mandaelis are paying for East Harbor. They are paying for the settlement, as well as the road connecting it to the King's Road. And what about the one on the western coast? Bearport, it's called, Lyra said. It was the dowry for our union, and is currently under Mormont governance, though they still owe taxes and fealty to us. It's mostly used for the lumber trade, as well as food and steel exports to other parts of the north. Have there been no offers by other houses to have a cadet branch in the gift? Ned asked. It certainly appears to be quite an attractive location. John sighed. There have been countless offers. But few to none have been respectful, or promising. The Mandaelis being the exception to the rule. At the tourney I had to fend off quite a few lesser lords of Hedge Knights asking for land. But none were prepared to spend the required coin on actually making a proper living here. They expected to be simply granted a holdfast, and do nothing themselves. How much would it cost for one to build a holding here? Ned asked. That depends entirely on what kind of place you want to live in, John said. Nobody should move here expecting to build a second Queen's Crown, as even though the tower already stood, we paid close to 80,000 dragons. That includes the town as well, and much of the surrounding lands, but still, that is an incredible amount of gold. The Mondalis told me that they were planning on spending closer to 30,000, and even that is quite a lot. If you wanted a small holdfast of stone, with at least some respectable defenses, I would not expect it to be under 10,000. And few are willing to spend that gold without reassurances, Ned concluded. John agreed. We have been here only a few years, and only lived here properly less than 2. Whilst we have been quite successful, these are not famously rich lands. The tourney certainly helped our image, what with us supplying nearly all of the food, but for many it would still be more attractive to purchase some lands in the Reach or Westerlands. Was I not a lord already, I would be tempted to move here. And I would welcome you with open arms, Ned. John smiled at him. Though you might send some cousins that may be interested, in your stead. I don't have any close cousins, Ned said. The closest would be some of the Danes of High Hermitage. But I don't trust them, so I wouldn't want to shove them off for you to deal with. Ah well, looks like I will have to keep searching then, John laughed. Maybe I should reach out to one of the countless Tyrell cousins, they would know about farming, and they have the gold. Though, the weather might not be to their liking. Even though you mean it in jest, it is far from a terrible idea, Beric said. Closer connections with the Reach could always be a good thing for the North. And there is a vast variety of houses and nobles to choose from, as the families of the Reach tend to be quite large. I will not deny that it has some merit, but the Northerners tend to be quite distrusting of outsiders, John said. Southron small folk is well and good, but a Southron noble house is something different, as something as trivial as faith can quickly become a point of contention. Fair point, Beric acknowledged. We will want to get the measure of any potential vassal first. Who knows, in time we might elevate some that are already in our service, Lyra said. They soon rode through the eastern gate, into the town itself. He waved at the people in the streets, as many of them were familiar faces. Both Ned and Beric remarked on the well-organized and constructed town, as well as the clean streets, something which he took particular pride in. He was excited to see that ever more different shops were sprouting up, no longer were there only essential wares being offered, such as food and drink, or simple clothes. An increasing amount of more specialized traders and craftsmen offered their wares and services, such as a jeweler who was using the dragon glass from the nearby caves, or even multiple spice traders from Dawn and Bravo selling various powders, berries, barks, or herbs. Crossing the bridge, they were soon in the courtyard of the castle itself. The entire household stood to welcome them again, with Deryn Castle being the one to greet them personally. John soon invited Beric and Ned inside, ordering their men to be seen to. They would find plenty of space on the second floor for them. I hope you like stairs, John smirked, as they walked through the entrance hall. It can't be much worse than the Palestone sword, Ned said. He changed his mind after the third floor. How high is this tower? Beric asked eventually. He was quite out of breath as well. Deceptively tall, John laughed. He and Lyra were used to climbing the endless stairs, and so were doing much better than their guests. It is quite wide, and so appears smaller than it is. From the floor to the roof, it is over 180 feet. Whoever built this must have hated their servants, Ned gasped. Oh, we have multiple servant quarters, Lyra said. They seldom have to go up more than one flight of stairs to go about their business. But you are correct, some of them do, especially the builders had to do so during the refurbishment, and they hate it at first as well. Though, from what Sarah tells me, quite a few of the maidservants have received good marriage offers. Something about walking stairs all day makes them quite shapely in certain parts. Lyra. John tried to reprimand her, but could not help but join in the laughter. And he also had to admit that Lyra certainly had a shapely behind, as well as powerful thighs he had gotten to know quite well in their time since the wedding. Eventually, they reached the 5th floor, where they had offered the best chambers for Beric and Ned. I hope you find them to your liking, Lyra said. We usually break our fast quite early in the family dining hall. You are welcome to join us there on the morrow. The hall is the one at the end of the opposite hallway. As for dinner, it has been prepared, and is awaiting you in your chambers. I am sure after the week of riding, you will want to clean up and enjoy a good night's rest. These chambers are extraordinary. I once again thank you for your hospitality, Beric said. On the morrow, then, they bade each other a pleasant evening and retired to their respective chambers. Lyra and he washed, and ate, before deciding to get a head start on some of the scrolls and ravens that had piled up. They split their work, with Lyra handling most of the correspondence within the north, mostly from the Foresters, Mormonts and Mandaelis, and him dealing with the dealings within their lands, and some letters from the south. Lord Walderfree congratulates us on our success, and asks for a future joining of our houses, promising the bride's weight in silver. John scoffed. It looks like we have more kindling, if the servants need to light more fires. We do not even have a child, and already he tries to force one of his brood on us. That man really has no shame. He certainly does not do himself a favor with his constant marriage requests. Lyra agreed. It really does surprise me how long that old weasel has lasted, or why no one has built another bridge over the Green Fork. Everybody hates them, but no one does anything about them. Money and a very defensible castle will do that for you, John said. Lyra agreed absent-mindedly. Lord Gregor asks if he could use Bearport as a staging ground for ironwood exports to the south. Apparently, the Riswells are demanding an increased tax, now that there are proper profits to be made in the south, and it would be cheaper to transport the wood from Ironrath to Bearport. Provided we offer a fair deal, of course. Has he sent any figures? He offers 15% if we simply allow the use of the docks, and 25% if we organize the shipping. John scratched his chin in thought. We could do the latter. Your mother gave us 5 longships, did she not? Aye, they are docked and ready. We could use those, or even buy some new cogs. Would it be worth it? Depends. What is the price he is aiming for in the south? He says, one of the Mormont longships could transport about 250 dragons worth of normal wood, and double to thrice that of ironwood. Lyra said. What? How large are these longships? John asked, surprised. He paid only 1 dragon for 50 trees of the best quality. The amount Lyra mentioned would never fit on any ship. Substantially larger than the Ironborn longships, Lyra answered. We have plenty of wood, so we can build them large, the squids don't. But the Southrons pay an absurd amount of gold for wood. Depending on the region, almost 10 to 20 times of that which we pay. Besides, you can simply tie the stems together, and let them float behind the ship. Ironwood, especially, does not care about salt water. If we consider that we could import some goods on the return, this will surely be worth it. Though, it might be less than 50 per journey, but if it is this much, tell Lord Gregor that we will gladly accept his proposal, but also demand a discount for our own wood purchasing. Nothing too extreme, maybe 10%. I am sure he will agree, she said. The north is no longer where the money is for them, a few percent less, won't hurt anyone. Shall I already send word to Bearport? Aye, do that. Also tell them to enquire into buying more ships. They needn't be suitable for war, only trade, he said. Maybe we can also profit off of the south. I can already answer that enquiry, Lyra said. Forget cogs, buy more longships. Southron cogs are ill-suited for our northern seas and are slower than a lame snail. If I sent word to my mother, I am certain that we will get a very fair price. That was easy, John chuckled. Do you also happen to know what the price might come out to be? I heard that the Mandaelis bought some for 2,000 apiece. Though, knowing my mother's attitude towards them, they probably cost less than half that to make. So let's assume 1,000 apiece. That is not too bad, John said. Especially with my winnings, we could invest some of that into a trading fleet. The bottleneck will probably be the crews to man them, though we might be able to recruit some with the early voyages south. I say, let us buy 10 ships, and start sending our current ones south to begin relations, Lyra said. And I will see what I can haggle out of my mother. John had to laugh at that. I will leave it to you, then. I would like to stay on my godmother's good side a few years longer. Don't you worry, I'll handle Mama Bear. Lyra smirked, and started to write the letters. Other missives included the reports from Smoker Town and the ever-increasing steel production. Their figures looked extremely good. And also the supposed discovery of some silver deposits in the deeper parts of the southwestern mountains. It would be quite a bit more difficult to mine than the iron ore, but John gave the permission to pursue it further. A silver mine never hurt anyone, even a small one. Other than a report from Samedric about the state of East Harbor, citing a population of 4,000, and decent commerce, so far, nothing further of note had come up during his absence. The rest was smaller, more menial decisions he would need to make, but those could wait. As promised, they broke their fast with Beric and Ned in the family dining hall. "I had not expected to have fresh oranges in the north," Ned said, as he happily munched on a few of them. "They remind me of my home." "I thought they might," John smiled. "We grow them in our glass gardens. So far, they have provided ample fruit. Though, I am quite partial towards our local pears and plums myself." "I continue to be astounded by your produce," Beric admitted. "When we came north, I expected to find a quite, shall I say, rugged cuisine." "Oh, the north has plenty of that as well," Lyra said. "Don't expect Queen's Crown to be a representation of northern cuisine. I grew up on porridge and honey with a bit of bacon, and that is considered a good breakfast. We are quite fortunate to have such produce at our disposal." "Then we visited the correct castle," Ned grinned. "These are the best oranges I have had in years." "I am glad to hear it," John said. "We had the trees imported from Dawn. I was glad to see that they survived the trip. We are even growing some of your peppers, though our cooks are still somewhat confused as to what to do with them. So far, pickled cabbage is the only thing they are doing with it." "A good start," Ned said politely, "but I will have to order the cooks back home to write down some recipes for you. There is so much good food in Dawn that is simply ignored by the rest of the realm. And you seem to be growing a lot of the required ingredients already." "I would welcome that," John said. "Perhaps the next time you visit, you can judge my cook's efforts." "Gladly," Ned grinned again. "If you would take a ship from Starfall to your western port, it would only take a moon to travel, not that long, considering. I will have to come and visit you down south as well, then. I have not been outside of the north, since I came here as a babe." "You could even establish some trade deals right now," Beric pointed out. "Friendship and trade are some of the best ways to forge alliances. Just yesterday evening, we discussed the possibility to expand our fleet to increase trade," Lyra said. "We could allocate some of those new ships to a constant trade route between Bearport and Starfall." "A splendid idea," Beric agreed. "What would you offer to be shipped?" "Our steel," Lyra said, and John nodded. "You saw John's armor, as well as that of our Frost Guard. It is some of the finest there is. And we can offer a very good price. Beyond that, wood perhaps. We have good relations with the foresters. Or pelts and leather." "Steel, wood, and leather sound good," Ned said. "But we don't have much use for furs in Dawn." "No, I expect not," John chuckled. "What could you offer in return?" "Usually we export much of our fruit or wine, though that appears to be well taken care of," Ned said. "We are not avid wine drinkers in the north, true, but there is always a demand," John said. "Not too long ago, our cook made a absolutely delicious wine sauce to go along with summer ox. I am sure we could find some uses. Besides, sour wine is always in demand for cleaning wounds, making ointments, and countless other things. So, if you could offer us some of that, I am sure the North will gladly buy it." "You may be right, maybe the supply was simply lacking," Ned shrugged. "But otherwise, we can offer spices, cloths, oils, and even glass. We may not be as famous for it as MYR, but it is of decent quality, and more than suitable for your glass gardens." "That is a very good offer," Lyra said. "If we could import more glass at a cheaper price, we would be quite well off for the winters. Mayhaps you can send a letter to Starfall, inquiring after some prices, and then we can negotiate something before you leave," John said. "I wouldn't want to ask you to come up with them from the top of your head." "Thank you, John." "That sounds like a good idea," Ned agreed, before whipping his hands on a napkin. "Now, shall we spar?" John had to grin at his eagerness. "Aye, we shall." After changing, they made their way towards the training grounds in the south of the town. Lyra did not join them, and instead decided to visit some shops, and talk with the people. Always a good idea. Roderick was already drilling a large number of new recruits when they arrived. John had sent a letter ahead, telling him to increase the numbers. They had the coin now, and John felt it a good investment. Better security meant more trade, which meant more people, which resulted again in more trade, and so the cycle would continue. They greeted some of the present men and boys, for some were no older than Ned. They definitely appeared more than willing to impress before the nephew of the former Sword of the Morning. But soon, they moved towards a more secluded area, and picked up their training blades. "Let us see, anything particular you want to work on today?" John asked. For the time being, John had essentially taken over Ned's training. Beric certainly encouraged it, and was not too self-centered to deny that John was the better swordsman. Not everyone could beat the Kingslayer in a duel. "Well, I have been meaning to work on the swiftness of my strikes," Ned said, taking a blunted bastard sword. "You always make it look so fluid. I never seem to be able to match your movements." "I see," John said, and thought about some methods for Ned to improve. "Then let me see your current form for quick successive strikes. You only attack, and I will only block. Then we can see if I can give you some pointers." Ned nodded, and went into position. On John's signal, he launched into a barrage of attacks, that were anything but slow. John managed to defend, and blocked them all, but it was no menial task. There were countless seasoned knights that would not be able to match the young Dane. "Very good," John said after a few minutes. "You are already much better than the majority that fought in the melee in Winterfell." Ned smiled at the praise. "I think more speed and agility will come with age. You are still growing into your own limbs, and that sword you are wielding is quite heavy for someone your age, so I will naturally have the advantage with a similar-sized sword, whilst being a man grown. However, I think we can work on the fluidity of your strikes. You sometimes try to change the angle of your next attack too much, and spend unnecessary strength on doing so. How can I change that?" Ned asked. "Relax your grip and feel the way your sword is moving during your swing. Don't try to divert the direction, but use the spare momentum and let it flow into your next strike. Here, let me demonstrate on a few strikes." John moved to a training dummy, and struck multiple times in diagonal swings, making sure to display the fluidity he had preached about, and soon increasing the pace of his strikes, until it was only a blur. Both Beric and Ned had wide eyes at the end. "Your sword is the extension of your arm, as I'm sure you have heard countless times," John said. "So don't fight your sword on its way, but guide it along. Now, you try on the dummy." Ned got into position, and begun his swings. He started out at a slower pace, making sure to implement what John had told him, but soon increased the frequency from there. "Faster," John ordered. Ned complied and made an increased effort. "Faster," John ordered again. Sweat was now flowing freely down Ned's face, but he tried his best to follow John's commands. He was doing very well. He was certainly a quick study, and managed to adopt the technique without much trouble. When Ned looked close to passing out from exertion, John stopped him. "I think he is dead," he laughed. "You did extremely well, Ned. Drink some water, and rest for a bit. After that, you will use it against me." Ned looked exhausted, but was seemingly happy with the results. John sparred a few rounds with Beric, giving the older knight also a few pointers on where to improve. Beric did not manage a single hit, but took it in stride. Soon, Ned rejoined them. He had obviously splashed some water on his face, as his pale blonde hair was sticking to his face and the shirt he was wearing was completely soaked. Even if the weather was too cold for his Dornish blood, Ned always gave his all during training, and soon forgot about the frosty autumn winds. "Ready?" John asked, and Ned only nodded. They both got into position, and repeated their earlier exercise. Only this time, John had to really focus, in order to block all of the strikes. On several occasions, he had to dodge out of the way, in order to avoid being hit. Ned did leave some openings, which he could have exploited, but overall, he was doing exceptionally. John even became slightly out of breath. After it had gone on for long enough, John did exploit one of the openings, and quickly disarmed Ned. "That was much better than the first time," John said. I'm sure, you noticed that I occasionally had some serious difficulties, trying to block all of you strikes. I think, if you continue to employ such speed in the future, you will be an amazing swordsman. Ned, again, grinned wildly at the praise. Not arrogantly, just as a lad who got the approval of someone he admired, which Beric had told him, Ned did. After his double victory in the tourney, and his direct victories against Sir Barristan and Sir Jaime, he had apparently become the lad's idol. It felt strange to be admired, but Ned was a kind and polite person, and he was happy to help him in any way possible. He owed it to Sir Arthur. For the man had given his life trying to protect him under any circumstance. Even if it had been against the wrong men. Jon had already decided to tell Ned the truth, before they would depart of the war. Maybe Maester Aemon had some stories about the Kingsguard that Ned might enjoy. Now, I think a proper spar is in order, Jon said. Whilst flurries can be useful, especially if your enemy on the back foot, they can leave you open. I am sure you noticed how I disarmed you. You did not leave many openings, which is very good, but there were a few. Those get ironed out as one spars. I will try my best, Ned said, getting into position. No, Jon said, you will do your best. You can try when learning new moves and tricks on dummies. But you will do your best in any proper spar. Always give it your all, otherwise you may never know what you are truly capable of. Ned seemed to take his advice to heart, and fought with serious determination. And he fought well. Jon saw only a few openings, and with some he did not know if even he could have exploited them. Naturally, he did not give his all himself, as there would be no proper lesson in ending the spar too soon. Some teachers enjoyed humiliation as a motivator, and would have used the earliest opportunity to send their students to the ground. Jon did not. And certainly not with Ned. The lad thrived on praise, which furthered his own ambition, instead of inflating his ego. In the end, Jon used Ned overextending himself, leaving his right side exposed, which he had done multiple times during the spar. Jon used it immediately to suggest tips on how to avoid the same mistake in the future. During their next round, the mistake was gone. They spent about a fortnight in Queen's Crown before moving on to the wall, and the time had been well spent. A few days before their departure, Ned had received a letter from Starfall, with some of their wares, and the prices they sold them for. Out of respect, Jon had not asked to see it, and instead negotiated the deal fairly. Beric helped Ned in the talks, as he had the most experience, but it was hardly necessary. Neither side was aiming to squeeze every last halfpenny out of the other, and so, they soon agreed on a sensible deal that would benefit both sides. Jon let their steel go for slightly less than the Mandaelis paid, and also promised the wood and leather, as well as even some dragon glass. In return, they would receive some barrels of wine, not too many, as they were unsure of the demand, silks, and other cloths, olives, spices, sour wine, and, most importantly, the glass. The latter was almost at a third of the price they were currently paying, much to Jon's delight. They would be able to make a lot of gold selling the glass to the other northern houses. Even though Lyra was starting to properly show, she insisted on coming with them to Castle Black. She had not seen her uncle in a very long time, and since the wall was only a 2-day ride away, she would return on her own should his stay prove to become more extensive. As a sign of good faith, they packed a few wagons full of food and weapons, mostly the ones they had received for their wedding, as they were of much inferior quality to their new equipment they now produced themselves. Ned certainly seemed excited at the prospect of seeing the wall. Jon had made the short journey on 2 occasions, so far. Mostly to discuss the lay of the land, and the most predominant locations for wildling attacks. They had both been short, and he had never seen the Maester, so he was really looking forward to meeting him as well. Though, the day before they were set to depart, Jon took Ned aside in the evening, to finally reveal the biggest secret in the realm. He brought him to his private solar, with the chest containing the dangerous truth paste next to him. Ned, you are probably wondering why I wanted to speak to you without Beric, Jon said, and Ned gave a shallow nod. What I am about to tell you must not be repeated under any circumstance to anyone. Not to Beric, not to your aunt, not to your future wife. This is my secret to share, and I choose to trust you, as it involves your family. But should it come out, it could mean my death and that of my family. Do you understand? Yes, Ned said, and swallowed heavily. You have my oath as a Dane that I shall keep your secret. John looked at him for one more moment before beginning. The secret is that of my mother, he said. Ned's eyes widened, but he did not speak. I know that Wyler is not my mother, because my mother was Lyanna Stark. If Ned's eyes had been wide before, they were now huge. He was nothing, if not quick of mind. That means that my father was Rhaegar Targaryen, John continued. I am telling you this, because your uncle died at the Tower of Joy defending me and my mother, and I could not in good conscience maintain the lie to you that he somehow aided in the kidnapping of an innocent woman. My mother loved Rhaegar, and ran away with him. They were married under both the old gods and the new, and my real name is Jaehaerys Targaryen. I have the documents with me. He pulled out the marriage contract, as well as the birth certificate, naming him as true, and handed them to Ned. He took them wordlessly and looked them over, though his eyes soon found him again, laying the papers back onto the desk. You are the rightful king, he said quietly. Maybe, maybe not, John shrugged. Supposedly the Mad King disinherited Rhaegar in favor for Viserys, others say that Robert won it by right of conquest. The truth is, I care not. I have my home, my wife, my future child, and I belong in the north. This is a lot to take in, Ned stammered. I know, John sighed. I found out only after my wedding, imagine my surprise. So, what do you plan on doing? Ned asked. Nothing in regards to any claims I might have, John shrugged. But I do want to know more about my family. The trip to the wall is not purely business related for me, as the Maester at Castle Black is Aemon Targaryen, son of Maker I and Deanna Dane. I want to talk to him, maybe so do you. That is why I told you now. The mention of Deanna got even more of his attention. He must be extremely old, Ned said, still processing everything. Over 100 name-a-days. I don't really know what to say to all of this. Neither did I, John admitted. Nor do I now. I do not want a war, and certainly not one fought due to me. There are no plots, or schemes underway, and I simply wish to live my life, so you need not worry about being caught in some intricate web. I told you because I trust you, and certainly would like to call you my friend. And because I felt like I owed it to you, to your family. The day may come when the secret is no longer dangerous. After all, who knows what will happen in the future? But until then, I will remain as Jon Frost, Lord of Queenscrown. Ned nodded. So, I cannot tell Illyria. She is Arthur's sister. Jon sighed. It is not as though I am distrusting of her. I simply do not know her, he said. Should I ever visit Starfall, or should she come to visit, then I'll tell her. But I would prefer for it to come from my mouth, and not relayed. Is that acceptable? I think so, Ned said. There is still some time before she is said to marry Sir Beric, so she might have time to visit, or you us. I would like that, Jon agreed. The winter may be long, so perhaps I could use a vacation in the warmth of dawn. You are most certainly invited, Ned said, now happier than before. He seemed to have handled it well, all things considered. Though, that might have been because he was not directly involved. And I would also like to call you friend. You have welcomed Beric and I into your home, dined with us, sparred with us, given us warmer clothes, and now you have shared your secret with me. Should you ever require anything, you need but ask. Jon smiled and poured 2 mugs of ale. I would raise a glass of fine Dornish red to our friendship, but alas, the first barrels have not yet arrived. So for now, you will have to contend with northern drink. To our friendship, they both said, and raised their mugs. Jon drained his quickly, but Ned had to stop midway though, and had to fight a cough. Not quite Dornish red, is it? Ned asked. Certainly not, Jon laughed. But you did well, considering. One of my favorite distraction at the feasts was watching Southrons choke on our drink. There was not much else to do, whilst stuck next to the king. It's not bad, Ned said. Just unusually strong. It's ale that's brewed here in Queenscrown, Jon smirked. We have clean water readily available, so we have no need to use ale as common drink. This stuff is made to get drunk, so I tend not to overindulge. Mayhaps we should have added it to the trade agreement, Ned chuckled. I know quite a few who would like it. Well, it's not too late, Jon said. The first ship is set to leave as soon as it arrives from Bear Island, so maybe a few se'nights from now. My guards would love me for it. Ned also laughed. But until then, I shall follow your advice, and not drink too much of it. Wouldn't want the town to run dry. That is probably for the best. My people would never forgive you. You Northerners and your ale. You Dornishmen and your wine. They both burst out laughing again, and spoke some more on trivial matters. John was glad that Ned had taken everything well, as he liked the lad, and truly wanted to be his friend. Soon enough, they both retired for bed. Lyra already awaited him in their bedchamber, and he quickly shed his clothes and climbed underneath the furs. Everything went well? Lyra asked, as she tucked herself into his chest. He took it well. That's good, she murmured. I like the lad. He only hummed his agreement before he drifted off to sleep. As planned, they arrived on the second day, some time before sundown. The wall was as imposing as ever, and Castle Black was slightly less run down than before. Little improvements here and there were being done with the now available funds. It was not attractive to live in by any means, but it no longer resembled the penal colony as it once had. As soon as they approached the gates, they were called to halt. Who goes there? The man on the walls called out. They carried banners displaying their respective sigils, but apparently they needed to spell it out for some. Lord John Frost of Queenscrown, Lady Lyra Frost, niece to the Lord Commander, Sir Beric Dondarrion of Blackhaven, and Lord Edric Dane of Starfall. John replied. You may enter, the man replied. How gracious, he muttered under his breath, to which Ned and Lyra chuckled. In the courtyard they were met by quite a few men, though it seemed as though it was rather involuntary. What seemed to be recruits were being whipped into shape by an old gruff man, who looked like he had never smiled a day in his life. Alisa Thorne, if John remembered correctly. The man had been quite unpleasant the past times John had visited, and so he did not concern himself too much with him. What made him smile was his Uncle Benjen. He was waiting next to the man that could only be the Lord Commander, Gia Mormont. Somehow, John had managed to miss the Lord Commander every time he had visited previously. Welcome, my lords, niece. The hospitality of Castle Black is yours, Gia said. They all dismounted, and John approached. I thank you, Lord Commander. I have come to discuss possible trade, as I already wrote about in my letter. That, and to see family, of course. You are always welcome, his uncle smiled. Though I see, you do not come alone. Indeed, John said. I extended an invitation to Sir Beric Dondarrion, and his squire, Lord Edric Dane, when I met them at the tourney at Winterfell. When I informed them of my intentions to visit the wall, I offered for them to come along, as not everyone from Dorne or the Marches gets the chance to see the wall. We are pleased to have you here, my lords, the Lord Commander said. It is good for people to actually see what transpires here. So often I feel as though we are simply a story. It is truly a pleasure to see this monument in person, Beric said. Whilst I would consider myself to be more travelled than most, there is nothing as impressive as this anywhere in the south. Will you take guest rights? Gia asked. Naturally, John replied, and took the offered bread and salt, as did the others. You needn't find space for my men, they have brought ample supplies for themselves. In fact, I took the liberty of donating some supplies. As the neighboring ruler, I feel as though I also profit from your protection, and thought to offer something in return. Food, drink, arms, and armor are all packed into those wagons. They are yours to do with as you please. This is most generous, and certainly welcome, the Lord Commander said. They were given the nicest available rooms, which were shabbier than the poorest they had in Queenscrown, but it would suffice for the few days. John had told his uncle that they would catch up soon, but he desperately wanted to meet Maester Aemon, and so he used the pretense of wanting to expand his library in Queenscrown, which was actually true, to visit him. He knocked softly onto the door, and heard the soft voice of the old Maester bidding him to enter. And who might you be, young man? I do not recognize your steps, Maester Aemon said. He was older than any person John had ever seen, almost impossibly so. He seemed ancient. His entire body seemed shrunken, with wrinkled skin, and milky eyes, that only possessed a hint of the purple John knew them to have been once. John made sure to close the door behind him, before taking a seat opposite from the old man. I am called John Frost, he finally said. Though that is not the name that was given to me at birth. Ah, the young lord of Queenscrown. Have you come to visit your uncle? I have come to see Uncle Benjen, John acknowledged, but from what I am told, I am also your nephew, though with some greats in front. I am Jaehaerys Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. The unseeing eyes that focused on him so intensely, widened with the surprise of the old man. I have mainly come to see my only family left in Westeros from my father's side. May I? Aemon asked, holding his hands towards Jon's face. Jon was a bit confused at first as to what he wanted to do, but soon acquiesced, and leaned forward. Of course, Maester. Aemon was touching, and feeling his face, his nose, jaw, chin, cheekbones, brows, everything. Soon there were tears rolling down the old man's face. Your coloring is that of a Stark, yes, he asked. Grey eyes, dark hair, Maester Jon said. Please call me Uncle, or Aemon. Thank you, Uncle Jon said. He was immediately taken aback by the kind tone the Maester adopted. How was it so easy to convince the old man? Not that he was not happy about it, he very much was. Being so readily accepted by his family from his father's side was almost like a dream come true. You look like Egg, you have his face. Aemon smiled wildly. This is the most joyous day I have had in a while. I thought that I was the only one left. Then I heard of your aunt and uncle, though they underwent an entire tragedy on their own. And now I find out that a child of Rhaegar yet lives. Born in the Tower of Joy, my uncle protected me by claiming me as his own, Jon said. Truly a wonderful man, Aemon said. He is still like a feather to me. Though today I am here for a different side of my family. I know what it means to be a Stark, but I know nothing of being a Targaryen. Aemon nodded in understanding, and remained in silence for a while. Tell me, Jaehaerys, do you wish for the throne? No, uncle, I do not, Jon said truthfully. I have my family, my wife is with child, and I have my life here in the north. I do not wish for more. I sometimes wish I was not forced to hide my true parentage, but it is a price I will willingly pay to live a happy life. His uncle nodded again. What is duty compared to the feeling of holding your child in your arms, he said. You may have once had a duty to the realm, Jaehaerys, but now you have your duty to your family. And I intend to live up to the latter, Jon said. My duty to the realm ended when Robert took up the crown. The realm is not particularly thriving, but it is not suffering either. Acting on any duty might only spell destruction. I commend you for your restraint. Few I have met would throw away the prospect of nigh absolute power. I am content, uncle. And I do not need the prestige of titles that others might. I have my name, my lands, and my family, though the order of importance should be reversed. As my wife told me when we were told the truth, I am my own man, and not beholden to the actions of my forebears. If only everyone had that luxury, Aemon sighed. I will not deny that there is truth in what you speak, as it holds true for you in large parts. But you did not have to contend with the evils that our family has done. Your uncle, Viserys, mad he may have been towards the end as I hear, but he had the weight of a great legacy, as well as the burden of terrible atrocities weighing down on him. He never got to be his own man, as you say. Because no one knows who I truly am, Jon said. Yes, because no one knows of your Targaryen heritage, Aemon agreed. It is a terrible thing, to be judged by the actions of others, but our world is defined by legacies, and those legacies care not for the descendants they may crush beneath them. You asked what it meant to be a Targaryen. This is it. To be weighed down and crushed by the weight of the legacy you carry, to accept with that weight, and to rise above it. Your Aunt Daenerys has, though she may not comprehend everything the legacy entailed to begin with. She has acquired power, but uses it for good, freeing slaves throughout Essos. And so have you. You have accepted that this legacy exists, and whilst it is not crushing you publicly, I will not deny the pressure it places on you, still. You have accepted that you can exist without the need for bloodshed, and so you do not force it. You use the power you have for good. I have heard of you success in new lands, the people do not fear winter under your rule. You could strive for more, so much more, yet you live with what you were given, not what you were owed. That requires strength. Thank you, uncle. I know that I had it easier than most, but I do try to make a difference. And that is what counts. Jon thought a while on his uncle's words. They made sense, and he could truly understand the luxury he had with not having to defend himself for his grandfather's actions. Though that turned his thoughts towards his aunt. You mentioned Daenerys, uncle. Are you in contact with her? In contact? No, I gather all of the information I can, but alas, I am limited in my reach. I had hoped to contact her, at least. Even though it may be dangerous, I feel like I owe it to her, letting her know that she is not alone, Jon said. A Targaryen alone in the world is a terrible thing, Aemon agreed. Do you wish to write to her? Well, I could not send a letter with my identity out in the open, for anyone to intercept and discover. That would be irresponsible, and would only endanger my family. But letting her know that she is not alone and that people think of her may be enough. I certainly felt better knowing that you were alive, and nearby, uncle. I agree that your safety should not be discarded so easily, Aemon said. But I am but an old man, and thought the world may have forgotten me. My existence is no secret. I can try and send word to her. And you may include a small message for her, something that alludes to you, though does not endanger you. That is all I could ever hope for, Jon said with a smile, even though his uncle could not see it. I could write the letter for you, or even my wife could, should we try to hide my hand. Though my sight is gone, I still am capable of using a quill. You tell me your message, Jaehaerys, and I will put it in writing. Jon eventually settled on a not overly cryptic one, but it would not be concrete proof that he was involved, especially coming from Aemon. He spent the entire day talking to his uncle, and welcomed his advice in many aspects. Old he may be, but his mind was still sharp as Valyrian steel. Eventually, they covered even his pretense, and Aemon gladly gave him many of his more treasured books. There were quite a few on subjects relating to Targaryens, and their Valyrian roots, something that would serve no purpose once he was no longer with the Watch. In the end, the library at Castle Black was quite a few books poorer, but Queen's Crown was all the more richer for it. In total, Aemon gave him almost half of all the books. The rest were outdated tomes on healing, or general books, such as maps, houses, history, and the likes. But the true treasures were soon loaded onto the now empty wagons, ready to depart back to Queen's Crown. Stefan was going to have either a wonderful day, seeing all of those rare tomes, or suffer a stroke, from all the additional work he now had. Either way, they would continue to be treasured. Chapter 12, So Close and Yet So Far. Summary. Jon receives some family heirlooms, deals with some outlaws, Sir Barristan makes a choice, and Dany makes her first appearance. Notes. We are starting to get more characters' perspectives, I hope you like it. Happy Smiley. Chapter text. Jon Frost. It was strange meeting his uncle Aemon. Not strange in a bad way, mind you, just not quite as he had expected. The man was old, sure, but his mind was quicker than most, and he seemed to have an infinite repertoire of wisdom. And Aemon was not sparing in importing said wisdom onto him. He did not cradle Jon, did not shy away from speaking harsher truths, but everything he said was a lesson better learned. It was refreshing, in a way. These were not lessons on ruling a castle, or sword fighting, but of values and duty. A reminder that whilst Jon may be a man grown, certain experiences could only come with age. What will you do, should Daenerys seek to claim the throne, and you were called to arms? Aemon asked. They were once again in the old Maestas chambers. I would hope that my father would never call the banners against her, Jon said. But even if he did, I am certain I would refuse. I will not fight kin. I hope that you will have the luxury to choose, Aemon said. But would you fight for her? If I was not forced to fight my other family, then I. Within a heartbeat. Aemon nodded. Family is important, and too often are the bonds of blood forgotten, in favor for power and wealth, for easy answers to difficult dilemmas. They are not unbreakable, and one must not think them as such. But everyone needs a family, be it by blood, or by choice, and I hope that one day, you and Daenerys may find one another to forge such a bond. Were she to need refuge, I would offer it without question, Jon said. But if what you say is true, she does not need my protection. Maybe not today, Aemon said, but there are many types of protection, and the day may come when you must protect her yet. Then I will do my best, John promised. Begrudgingly, John also spent time outside of the Maester's chambers. He met with his good uncle in his solar to discuss the possible trade. So, Lord Frost, what would you offer the Night's Watch? Gia asked, after they had both sat down. Plenty, John answered. Food, steel, furs. I know that you are always in need of such things. I can offer them from my lands, making them much cheaper than any imported goods from the Reach, or the like. Gia grunted. Those flowers have driven up their prices by quite a bit in recent years. So, what do you propose? How many men does the watch have currently? John asked. 4,000, give or take a few hundred. John went over some figures in his head. He knew how much they calculated for the winter rations, so he had some vague idea how much the watch could need. Let us say, I offer you food for 5,000. That leaves you with ample reserves, and allows you to store some for desperate times, John said. And what would that food encompass? Gia asked. And how much would it cost? As for our deliveries, grain is a given, as well as salted pork, beef, and plenty of greens and other vegetables. As for the cost, I think 6,000 would be a good offer. Per year, that is. The Lord Commanded only slowly nodded. And the steel and furs? Let us say, 3 wagons every 4 moons. That would be ample. Those things I can supply for 4,000 a year, making the total around 10, John said. It was quite hard for him to read the other man's expressions, or rather, the lack thereof. The offer was very generous, at least considering the current prices. This seems acceptable to me, Gia finally said. It will certainly save us a good amount of gold. I am glad to be of assistance, John told him truthfully. As neighbors, I hold the watch and its service in high esteem, especially with family serving. If only all shared your attitude, Gia said. People tend to ignore the things we do up here. I certainly do not, John said. Thanks to you, my lands are kept safe from the north. That they are, the old man agreed. It was a pleasure having you here, Lord Frost. It was a pleasure visiting, John said in turn, and took the offered hand. Lyra had also spent some time with her uncle, though both Gia and Benjen were much more busy than Eamon, and as such, their time together was quite limited. What did surprise both Lyra and him, was when Gia took the ancestral family sword of House Mormont, Longclaw, and gave it to them. John had tried to refuse it. After all, who simply gave away Valyrian steel? But Gia had asked for it to be wielded by a worthy Mormont, and since Lyra was more than worthy, he handed it to her. She was a bit skeptical, as she preferred the mace, but John promised to teach her, and said that she could pass it on to one of their children, when they were of age. She reluctantly agreed, but said that should Daisy have any children that might want it back, she would offer it to them. Those terms, they could all agree on. Ned and Beric spent most of their time wandering the castle, and took to lift to the top multiple times. John had also been on a few occasions, and the view was certainly spectacular. Furthermore, Ned had also visited Eamon, though what they spoke on, he did not ask. But it probably pertained to Sir Arthur, or Deanna. Eamon was half Dane, after all. After less than a sennight, they made ready to leave once more. With Lyra becoming ever more heavy with child, they both preferred for her to be in the safety of Queen's Crown and not in the cold, that seeped through every nook and cranny in Castle Black. The evening before they were set to depart, Eamon requested his presence in his solar once again. Come in, my boy, Eamon said, when John knocked on the door. You wanted to speak to me, uncle? Yes, there is one last thing I wanted to speak to you on. John took his usual seat in front of the Maester, and took the old man's hands into his own. Of course, uncle. I know that I am old, Eamon began. And I fear that my time will soon come to an end. Don't say that, Uncle John pleaded. I have only just met you, and Daenerys still hasn't. You mustn't leave us yet. If I were but a few decades younger, I would have agreed, Eamon smiled sadly. But I am not. And some things do not wait for our desires, time among them. However, you have given me so much more hope than I ever had thought to find, after I was forced to see my family be torn apart. With you, young Lyra, and your children, our line will live on. If not by name, then by blood. I have lived my life, Jaehaerys, longer than anyone should. I am not asking you to shed no tears, but be not sorry should I die, for my time will have come, at last. I will try to visit again, uncle, but should we not meet again, I promise that you will be remembered, and not forgotten, Jon swore. That is all an old man can ask for, Aemon said, and patted Jon's hand. Now, before you leave, there are some more things that I would like for you to have. Do you see that chipped floorboard over there? Jon followed Aemon's finger, and soon found one that matched the description near the fireplace. Uncle, I see it. Lift it, and take out whatever you find underneath. Jon got up and did as he was asked. It was a bit tricky at first, and he almost broke one of his fingernails, but he eventually got it. There were two objects inside, both wrapped in cloth. One was long and thin, the other was more round. Jon pulled them both out, and placed them on the table next to where Aemon sat. Until you came, I thought that the secret of these would die with me, but now it is your duty to see them protected. What are they, uncle? Unwrap them and see. One is from the former Lord Commander, Brynden Rivers, the other is from myself. Jon picked up the longer one first. Brynden Rivers, also known as Bloodraven, was the last no-wielder of Dark Sister. But that could not be it, could it? With shaking hands, he unwrapped the aged linen. He was met with a beautiful thin sword, with dragon motifs on the crossguard and pommel. The blade was Valyrian steel. Uncle, is this? Dark Sister, you are correct, Aemon said. Brynden entrusted it to me, before he ventured beyond the wall for the final time. It is a dangerous blade, and it is said to thirst for blood, so take care to not indulge it. Jon continued to look at the sword in awe. This was the sword of Visenya, of Aemon the Dragon Knight, of the Rogue Prince. And now he was holding it. This. I don't know what to say. How did it never return to the hands of the Targaryens, uncle? Aemon sighed. I took the last wish of my granduncle to heart. It was my brother, Aegon, that banished Brynden Rivers to the wall, and that act was never forgiven. So, he asked for it not to be returned out of spite. I always expected for it to be returned after my death, but that would no longer have occurred, now that our family is close to extinction. Jon was still looking at the blade in awe. This is a tremendous gift, uncle. Thank you. Promise you will take good care of it, Aemon said. That is all I ask. Of course I will, Jon said. This is priceless. And so is the other, Aemon said. Both have the potential for great evil, so you must take care with them both. Jon put Dark Sister back onto the table, and picked up the round object. He unwrapped it carefully as well, and was soon met with the sight of a beautiful dragon egg. The main color was white, though it had light blue accents. It reminded him heavily of his house's colors. It feels warm, Jon said, and it did, much warmer than it had any right to be in the cold room. As it did for me, Aemon nodded. Though either the time was not right for dragons to return, or it was not me that was destined to hatch it. Though now dragons have already returned, as your aunt is said to have 3. Mayhap, the time will come when this egg will hatch as well. But I caution you, do not force it. My little brother tried to do so at Summerhall, and our entire family paid dearly for it. I won't, uncle, I promise, Jon said. Besides, it would be hard for me to hide a dragon right now. They tend to become quite large. Yes, that would pose some difficulties, Aemon chuckled. I have faith that you will treat these heirlooms with the respect they deserve, and require. Thank you again, uncle. For your words and wisdom as much as for these. It's nothing, my boy. Because of you, I can live content, knowing you will live on, and that I will not be the last of us. Jon could not help himself, and embraced Aemon, which was soon returned. I will return, uncle, he promised. It may only be brief, but once my child is born, I shall tell you of them. I would like that very much, Aemon said. Children are such wonderful beings. And they are ever our future. Farewell, Jaehaerys, may we meet again. Farewell, Uncle Jon said, and could not help but shed a few tears. It had only been a few days, but Aemon was already very dear to his heart. It was a strange feeling, coming back home, even if they had been gone less than a fortnight. The few days with Eamon had certainly helped him understand some of his father's family a bit more, and now he felt even worse for Daenerys. He sincerely hoped that she would take hope from her having more family. He stored Dark Sister and the egg securely away in his solar. Both were such concrete evidence of his heritage that he dared not show them openly. It was a bit ironic, Lyra and he had gone to the wall to meet family, and both had returned with an ancestral sword of their families. Lyra had decided to hang it above her desk, for the time being. In her state, it was unwise to train with weapons, or to overly exert herself. Ned and Beric had decided to depart on one of the longships that would begin to travel the trade route between Bearport and Starfall. His good mother had sent them a response, telling them that she would provide them with ships at barely any additional cost, beyond construction. Since they had calculated about 10,000 for new ships, and they would receive them for less than one, they had ultimately agreed to purchase 15, and pay the originally intended amount. Naturally, they would not receive them immediately. It would take at least a year, but the first 2 would be sent before the moon was out, so that was a good thing. Since they would also need to transport the wood of the foresters, they would need them quite soon. They had allocated 4 to leave with goods for Starfall, and in their contract with Lord Gregor, they guaranteed the capacity of 5 longships. But since the deliveries from Ironrath would only begin in a couple of moons, they still had some time to receive more ships. If everything went to plan, there would be a scheduled ship departing from Bearport to the south at least once a se'night, if not more. A good start. Jon knew that they would never become a massive trading hub, such as Old Town or Lannisport, but for northern standards, they could be doing quite well. For he did his best to spend as much time with their guests as he could. Training with Ned was still a daily routine, but outside of that, he had to oversee quite a few matters that forced him to ride out. Mostly, it was visiting various towns and villages, and overseeing their progress, as well as checking the winter stores. It was not required that he would do them alone, and he did not, that would have been too much, but some personal presence always helped. The people needed to see their lord, in order for them to trust him. Unfortunately, there had also been some banditry near the King's Road that he had to see to. Multiple travelers had reported that they had been robbed, and one man had even told them that his 2 daughters had been taken by the bandits. Such things, Jon would never tolerate. At first, he had thought to send out a detachment of Frost Guard, but after hearing of the kidnappings, he decided to ride out himself. Beric and Ned offered their help, and together with Ghost and 20 Frost Guards, they went to track down the outlaws. By accepting so many strangers, Jon had always known that there would be the risk of some less than savory characters joining, but so far it had been largely only minor thievery which had been quickly seen to. This was something he had not encountered before, and it certainly stirred his rage. Stealing a loaf of bread was one thing, but kidnapping, and probably rape, was another whole offense. Jon had asked the man to provide 1 article of clothing from his daughters so that Ghost may try to find their scent. After only a few hours of search, they had found them. Jon entered Ghost's mind and observed the primitive camp that had formed in the woods. They had been smart enough to choose a denser part of the forest, and even put up some stakes. They would not be able to ride in, their horses would only break their legs, or skewer themselves. "We will have to go in on foot," Jon said to the group. "They are fortified enough for it to be a foolish plan to ride in. But I did not see any archers, so we will have an easier approach. It also appears as though they have several prisoners held in wooden cages towards the west." Beric looked at him with questioning eyes. "How did you see that? You did not leave us." "I am what is called a walk," Jon said. There was no use in hiding his abilities from his friends. "I can see through Ghost's eyes, if I so choose. I sent him ahead to scout out their position." "You can do magic?" Ned asked with wide eyes. "I guess it is magic. But I am not the only one who can. Skin changers, as those who can enter an animal's mind are called, are not common by any means, but they still exist throughout the north and beyond the wall. A warg is someone who has a bond with a wolf, or in my case, a dire wolf," Jon said. "A useful skill," Beric agreed. "Do they know we are coming?" "No, they are sitting around fires. I counted 6 and 10, but there may be some more out of sight." "How are they equipped?" "Poorly," Jon said. "Barely any armor, and mostly rusted weapons. Looked mostly Southron to me, so probably new to the area. Do you have a plan? Ned asked. We are to the east of them, and they are up against a southern cliff, so we can only really approach from two sides without delaying much longer. I would lead half of the men directly at them, and you would take the other half and come from the north. Were they better equipped, I would suggest we stayed in formation, but they are not, so I say that a quick surprise attack is our best chance. Sounds like a good plan, Beric said. Do we give any quarter? No, Jon said. I will not tolerate kidnapping and rape on my lands. If they do surrender, they will be executed back in Queen's Crown. As you wish, Beric nodded, and prepared his sword. They soon split up, and approached the camp. This would be the first time the Sword of Winter would taste blood. Jon had sent Ghost with Beric and Ned, as when Ghost would attack, that would be their signal to follow. As they got closer, he could see the fires in the fading light of the day, and could hear the cheering of the men. He drew his sword from its sheath, the eternal ice giving off a soft blue glow. Small ice crystals began to form on his hand and arm, but he felt it not. To him, it simply felt right to wield it. Behind him the 10 men followed his lead, all of them equipped with sword and shield, and their best armor, the winter rose predominant on their shields. With a last nod, he turned towards the foe, and began to charge. In the back of his mind, he could feel Ghost doing the same. They did not cry out, but swiftly rushed through the trees and past the wooded stakes. Only when they were almost upon them, did the first of the bandits notice that they were under attack. The man managed to cry out, but soon he was cut in half by Jon's sword. There had barely been any resistance, and where the blade had cut there was no bleeding, as everything had frozen within an instant. Jon had no time to think on it, as he rushed towards his next victim. The man had at least enough time to raise his sword, but it did not matter. The rusted steel shattered with a haunting screech, and Jon quickly plunged his sword into the man's gut. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Ghost ripping the arm of another, whilst Beric and Ned had also entered the fight. Another 2 bandits were close to Jon, and they seemed to be intent on taking him on together, probably seeing that holding the leader hostage was their only way to survive. Unfortunately for them, their plan did not work out. With a swift cut, the primitive wooden shield the one on the left was wearing was cleaved in twain, and the arm that had been holding it was gone as well. Before any of them could react, Jon decapitated the one on the right, before stabbing the one on the left in the heart, killing him as well. Looking around, Jon saw that all but 3 of the bandits lay dead on the ground, with none of his men even injured. The 3 men were backed into the cliff by a blooded Ghost and some frost guard, and had thrown down their weapons. Bind them, Jon ordered. They will be hanged in the town square. Let everyone see what we do with such scum. Burn the rest of the bodies. As the man carried out his orders, Jon approached Beric and Ned. Both had blood on their swords, and Jon almost pitied Ned for having slain a man so young, but he had insisted on coming along. The lad's face was certainly quite pale. "Are you all right, Ned?" he asked. It's just that this was my first time," Ned said. "I understand," Jon said. "Mine own was not too long past either. It was after I had assumed my position as lord. A man was caught raping a woman in a neighboring village. Here in the north, it is expected of the lord to execute criminals himself. It did not feel good, but the man deserved it. As did these bandits." Ned gave a slight nod. "I will not say that it will become easier with time, as it should not. Taking another life should never be easy, but you will learn to live with it. It may take some time, but you will." He gave a gentle squeeze to Ned's shoulder, and made his way towards the primitive cages which housed the prisoners. As expected, there were 2 young women, probably around Jon's age, and 3 younger children, 2 boys, and a girl. They all cowered in the back and held each other close. Jon quickly tossed away the piece of wood that blocked the entrance. "They took fucking children. Those scum all deserved death." "It's fine," Jon tried to reassure them in a soft voice, and crouched down to be at an eye level with them. "My name is Jon Frost, I am the lord of these lands. You are safe now. They won't come back?" one of the little boys asked. "No, they will never hurt anyone again," Jon promised, before turning to the young women. "Are you 2 the daughters of Tom by any chance? Is our father safe?" the slightly older one asked. He made it to Queenscrown, and asked for my help. I came as quickly as I could. He is waiting for you there. Thank you, Lord, she said. Any you three, do you have any parents? John asked the children. They's dead, the girl said. Fever took 'em. Is that why you were on the King's Road? They told us to go to the town, before they did. One of the boys said. Do you know of any relatives of yours that would take you? No, Lord, they's dead too. I am truly sorry to hear that, John said. But I promise that I will take good care of you. There is an orphanage in Queenscrown, and I know the woman who is running it personally. Now come, we are close enough that we can still reach the gates before it gets too dark. When they arrived, it was already dark, but not overly late. John had inquired as to their treatment, and was glad to hear that they had not been harmed, or at least not raped. It seemed that the bandits may have had the intention of selling them into slavery. Such a thing was not unheard of, unfortunately. Had they not intervened, the women and children may well have ended in some Isozi pillow house. It was certainly heartwarming to see old Tom reunited with his daughters, and John also escorted the children to Betty, who ran the orphanage. She was a kind, middle-aged woman, and John knew that she would take good care of them. Lyra had personally seen to the funding, so that the children would not grow up in poverty, and they would also receive an education in the public library that was being built. He knew that most who grew up in orphanages had a not so very bright future, and he hoped that he would be able to change that here. He also ordered for increased patrols to be sent out. Whilst this had been the first of such a case, one did not need to tempt fate. It would require more coin, but not too much, and the increased presence of guards would likely work to dissuade many from partaking in such evil acts. Lastly, John talked a bit more with Ned. He had handled his first fight well, but it never hurt to offer an ear to any questions or worries that may have arisen. Not unexpectedly, Ned wanted to mostly talk about John's sword. After the initial shock had dissipated, the magic ice blade was far too interesting for the lad to ignore. John gladly answered any questions Ned had, but sadly had to oftentimes admit his own ignorance, especially regarding its origins. Together with Lyra and Beric, they talked into the late hours of the evening, and enjoyed a midnight snack of fresh oranges and some leftover honeyed chicken. By the time they went to bed, Ned was in a much better mood, with the events of the day essentially forgotten. It was sad to see Ned and Beric eventually leave, but they had stayed for quite some time, and still had duties of their own. They had promised to try and arrange a visit at some point in time, be it him visiting Starfall or Blackhaven, or them returning to Queenscrown. When the wedding between Beric and Illyria would come, John would try to visit, though depending on when that would be, it would be quite difficult. It would be a trip of at least 3 moons, not something one did on a whim. A fortnight after the bandits, they departed for Bearport, where the ship to Starfall awaited them. It would also carry some steel and ale with it, and would hopefully be the first of many successful voyages to the south. The castle felt a bit more empty without the company of their guests, and both Lyra and he agreed that they would have to invite some of the Starks and Mormonts to visit in the near future. At the very least after the birth of their first child. For now, they went back into their daily routine, with them finally having some more time to spend with each other, instead of constant work. By the time Lyra was in her 7th moon, she was starting to show quite heavily. Stefan even suspected that she may be carrying twins. The prospects of 2 little cubs or pups made him quite giddy. Lyra bemoaned the fact that she was having to carry 2 children up the countless stairs now. Though, John knew that she was not adverse to the idea of twins in the slightest. She just liked to complain occasionally, and that was fine. I guess we will have to think of more names then, Lyra said one evening, as they were lying in bed. Only boy names, John said. I still want our first 2 girls to be Lyanna and Snya. You're right. I guess Cregan could work, though I never particularly liked that name. Alaric could work, but my favorite is still Ricard, after your grandfather. Not many Mormont men to name our boys after, huh? Unless you want to name our children Bear in the Woods, I suppose not, Lyra chuckled. And my uncle is far too alive for us to name someone after him. Alaric and Ricard are acceptable, I think, John said. I still wished we could use Valyrian names. Maybe someday, Lyra said, and placed a kiss on his cheek. Would you name one of our sons Eamon? Most definitely. or Daeron, or Maker, or Egon, after my brother, they had more interesting names to go around, instead of 1,000 Brandons. Tell that to the Egons, Lyra said. Wasn't there like 5 kings, named Egon? Not to mention the countless that never got the throne. Fair point, Jon acknowledged. Maybe not Egon then. Either way, I have a feeling that you will get your Lyanna and Snya sooner rather than later. You think it will be girls? Jon asked. How do you know? Call it a mother's intuition, she smiled. But if my mother is anything to go by, we Mormonts have a tendency to birth girls. I would not be opposed to that, Jon grinned. A whole pack of little girls for me to spoil. And to make the hallways unsafe, Lyra added. I can picture it already. Like Arya and Lyanna, when they were here. Jon had to smile at the memory. He missed his little sister, and was looking forward to when the Starks and Mormonts would all come to visit. Well, maybe with the exception of Lady Stark, but she would hopefully remain in Winterfell. Either way, he was so excited about the future. Soon his family would grow, and he would have his own children. Sir Barristan Selmy. He always had a lot of time to think whilst he guarded the door to the king's chambers. Even the constant moans and grunts coming from inside did not manage to distract him from the ghosts of his past. That boy that had unhorsed him was Rhaegar's son, of that he was certain. The way he moved, the way he fought, the way he rode, the shape of his jaw, chin, nose, cheekbones, it was all the prince. All hidden under the coat of a wolf, of course. Initially he had not made the connection. Certainly not whilst he may have had the opportunity to speak to him. But contemplating everything for days upon days, the thought had crept into his mind and would not leave. What had tipped him off in hindsight, had been the lad's behavior. To openly refuse being knighted by the king, something that would be considered the highest honor, was not something a former bastard did without reason. Sure, there may have been some truths in what the boy had said. Barristan knew that he was a figure many looked up to, but with all of the other clues. No, he was certain in this. Everything made too much sense. Many claimed him to be Ashura's son, but he was quite sure that it was not so. The timing made no sense. Whilst beautiful Ashura was spending more than a few moments with Stark, a child between them must have been at least a year old by the time the war was over. No, it made much more sense for him to be the prince's son with Lyanna Stark. The concept of Eddard Stark fathering a bastard had ever been difficult enough to believe. And Barristan could still recall the day the young Lord Stark had returned from Dorne, with the bones of his sister, and a young babe, he claimed as his natural son. It had been a babe of barely a moon, and not a small child. He had seen it for himself. But why had Lyanna died? Robert claimed that it was Rhaegar that had raped and murdered her, but that made no sense. No, it was not in Rhaegar's nature to do so, not under any circumstance. The prince that was so fond of music and poetry, who only took up the sword because he felt that it was needed of him, not out of any desire to kill, he could never harm an innocent woman, let alone rape and murder her. Besides, by the time Lyanna must have died, the prince was already moons dead. And there were also his former brothers in white. The bull, the bat, and the sword of the morning, true knights all. No, it made much more sense for them to be guarding something, or someone. A son of Rhaegar. And of course Eddard Stark would do the honorable thing and protect his blood over letting the bloodthirsty Robert, or the Lannisters, rip his little nephew apart. Granting the boy a lordship before his true-born sons, and a very valuable one at that, only reinforced that. Barristan had heard from his presence in the small council meetings just how well Queen's Crown was doing. Tales of extraordinary steel, large quantities of food, well-trained men, and now even an expanded fleet. This was not some plot of land to get someone out of his sight. This was a truly powerful seat. And now he was making friends with the young Lord Dane. The parallels were simply too close not to send a light pain into his old heart. Oh, how the Queen had raged after returning to the Red Keep. Her screams still echoed in his ears. Sir Jaime had been unusually quiet after his defeat by a boy of 7 and 10, but the Queen had not refrained from voicing her displeasure. More than once had he heard the terms upas bastard or treacherous savage. Never in front of the king, of course, as Robert liked the lad. The irony of it was not lost on Barristan. A hidden prince, far in the north, protected from the intrigues of court, living in a previously long-abandoned tower. A boy of 7 and 10 beating the most famous knights of the realm in a tourney, making friends and allies with his silver tongue, all the while the fat king that killed his father was drowning in his own gluttony. How he wished that he was not serving the current king, and could protect the boy instead. But he could not. Not only because of his supposed oath to the king, but also because it would only endanger his prince's son. A knight of the king's guard protecting some supposed bastard from the north, even if legitimized. Such things would only raise questions. There is one other, his mind told him. It was true, Varys had been spinning his tales of Daenerys Targaryen conquering the slave cities in the east. But not to sack them for riches, but to liberate those that were forced, or born into chains. A woman with a kind heart, and an army to enforce her will. And, if rumors were to be believed, 3 dragons at her back. After almost 2 decades, he could not stand it any longer. The realm was not really suffering, sure, but this was not what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. Protecting a whoremonger of a king, with his Lannister queen, who had all the grace of a cat thrown into a river, once you could see past the pretty exterior. Or the crown prince that made even young Aerys look sane. Sure, Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen were sweet children, but not cause enough for him to spend the rest of his life in misery. For all of his fever dreams, and milk of the poppy-induced hallucinations after he had been wounded on the Trident, he had been careful in saying his vows. He never actually had the intention of continuing to serve Robert, no. He simply wanted to have the chance to protect Rhaenys, Aegon, and Elia, if it came down to it, be their champion in a trial by combat, if needed. But Tywin Lannister had other plans. So he remained, for there was nothing else to do. Reports conflicted about the survival of Viserys and Daenerys, and he knew that he was not great tracker. He was a knight, not a spider on the wall. And by the time their location became known to him, he was no position to do anything. But now. Maybe he could. He would not care that he broke his supposed oath to Robert Baratheon. He never swore to serve him. In his oath, he swore to protect the rightful king of the 7 kingdoms, never the stag. He would be branded a traitor, and an oath-breaker, sure. But better to die serving someone he believed in, to serve the family that had given him everything, than to wither away in the shadow of a lecher. A se'night later, a fire broke out in the chambers of the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, leaving behind only some charred bones next to some molten armor that had been once a pristine white. There was great sadness over the passing of the legendary knight, with the entire city mourning the loss, nobles and small folk alike. And yet there was also great confusion, for surely this could have been no accident. But who would want to see the beloved Sir Barristan the Bold dead? The truth was simple, a man had to die to serve. Daenerys Targaryen. She awoke with the familiar sensation of a warm body next to her, their limbs still intertwined from the previous evening. The old Septons from Westeros would surely suffer strokes from seeing a princess, no a queen, in bed with another woman, but she cared not. Sweet Doria had been with her from the beginning, and remained loyal to her, always. For a short time she had believed to lose her in the Red Waste, but luckily she had pulled trough. That Doria had also been the first to show her the potential pleasures of the flesh certainly helped, even if it had been intended for her to please the Khal, at first. Now, that was years in the past, and Daenerys was the queen of the Bay of Dragons, and she could take whomever she wanted into bed. There were plenty of men who would jump at the opportunity to bed her. She was not blind to the looks everyone gave her, but she was not particularly fond of any of them. Besides, even if she had come to somewhat care for Drogo at the end, she had soon realized that it was the sense of control that he provided which made her miss him at first. Now that she was a queen in her own right, her appreciation of her former husband had significantly decreased. And she had been stupid enough to indirectly sacrifice her son, her own blood, for his life. The memories of the past often disgusted her. That man grown, had raped her, a girl of 4 and 10. No, she was no longer sad over his death. If only her son had survived. If I look back, I am lost. So she did not want to relive those memories, and Doria was more than adequate in sating her desires. She would reluctantly admit that she had come to care for the Lyseni. Her fair hair, her deep blue eyes, her lovely figure, her devotion, she would take that over some self-assured man, who only sought her as a trophy any day. She still used her looks to charm the men, of course. That fool Dario would jump off a cliff for a few glimpses of her body, and so would many others. They served their purpose, but she cared not for them. They were not following her because they believed in her, not like Doria, Irai, Jiki, Missandei, Grey Worm, or the rest of the slaves she had freed. They were serving themselves, and so she would treat them as such. They were not her people. It always greatly amused her to hear petitioners. She, a girl of barely 7 and 10, sitting high above those who would have considered themselves to be her superiors, had it not been for the dragons or the Unsullied. Now they bowed to her, and she, together with her court of freed slaves, decided over them. Missandei and Grey Worm were her most trusted advisors, but Doria also had good suggestions, occasionally. She was not learned, but she had experience in dealing with people, especially men, and so, often provided her with good advice. Today had been mostly dull. Complaints about lost sheep, misplaced wagons, and housing disputes were not of great interest to her. She had elevated freedmen that knew of their trade to positions to oversee such things. But occasionally people did not understand where they should turn to with their misgivings. Only shortly before she would have adjourned the session, a man who was not dressed in the typical clothes of the region stepped forward. He had long, light blonde hair, almost silver gold, and sea blue eyes. "May we have your name and request?" Missandei asked next to her. She had sort of become her herald, and she sort of liked it. "Sir Adam Valerian, your grace. I have come with a message." A Valerian. That was something one did not see every day. Their houses had ever been close to another, both being descended from Valyria. "I welcome you to Meereen," Sir Adam Daenerys said. "What is your message?" "My cousin, Montfort Valerian, the Lord of Driftmark, received a letter. It hailed from Castle Black. The maester of said castle is none other than Aemon Targaryen, the son of Maker I, brother to Aegon V. He is a man over a century of age, and requested us to relay his words to you." His great grandness Sir Adam offered a letter, which Grey Worm took and handed to her. She had other family. She had always assumed to be alone, after Viserys had gotten himself killed like a fool. And this Aemon had not forgotten her. She had to fight to keep her queenly mask, as she wanted to squeal in delight, read her uncle's words, and yet, weep at the possibility that she would never meet this man. For now, she pulled herself together, to continue. "You have done me and my family a great service, Sir Adam," she said with a true smile. "I bid you to stay a while, and tell me of my home. It has been so long since word reached me." "I would be honored, your grace," Sir Adam said. "Would my men be able to find a warm meal as well? Since my house still has to feign allegiance to the Baratheons, I could not travel here on any of our own ships, but had to use merchant vessels to do so." Naturally she smiled. "I will see to it that you are well cared for. Would you care to share dinner with me and my advisors in the evening?" "It would be my pleasure, your grace." "Excellent," she said, and watched as Sir Adam followed Irai towards the guest chambers in the Great Pyramid. "I think this will suffice for today. I shall retire to my chambers." With trembling hands, she undid the wax seal on the letter. It was the three-headed dragon in red, a sigil which only she used otherwise. The letter was larger than she had expected, and consisted of multiple pages, though only the first appeared to be a true letter, so she started with that one. The writing was slightly jagged at certain places, but completely legible. "My dear Daenerys, you may not have known of my existence, though only few remember me in these times. My name is Aemon Targaryen, the son of Maker Targaryen and Deanna Dane, and brother to Aegon the Unlikely, though I knew him as Egg. You must forgive an old man for not contacting you sooner, for I was uncertain if my letters would ever reach you, and not those who haunted your steps since your birth. But as the years pass, I do not grow younger, and I feared that I would never get the chance to write to you. Hence, I do so now. I cannot tell you how proud I am of you. I have been collecting every piece of information on your well-being and journey that I could, however minuscule. I am limited in my reach, as I am a man chained twice by oaths, those of the Maestus and the Night's Watch, as well as a man decades past his prime. But the words that have reached me, have brought me great joy. Of course I do not speak of your hardships. What your brother did was unforgivable. Mourn him I do, for he was my nephew, as you are my niece, but his actions towards the end, they were not that of a sane man. Nor am I talking about your time in the Grass Sea, being forced to marry at such a young age is never easy. Your mother shared a similar fate, being married young, and giving birth to your brother Roriger at only 3 and 10. But you endured. And now you have risen above so many, and have accomplished so much. You have brought dragons back into the world, you have liberated the downtrodden, and have forged a kingdom of your own. A Targaryen alone in the world, is a terrible thing. And yet, you are not completely alone. Be it your advisors, those that owe their freedom to you, or the bit of remaining family you have back in the West, there are people that believe in you, and only wish you the best. You wield great power, and you do so with great compassion, a compassion that comes from your mother. Many will call you the daughter of Aerys, of the Mad King, and mad he was. But I see my niece in you. R'hllor was sweet, kind, clever, and funny. She was a bright light in the darkness. A light that was dimmed for much of her life, and extinguished far too soon, and the world is poorer for it. You are your mother's daughter with the power that she was ever denied, you are the best of us. I wish you'll tell you that your home awaits you with open arms, but I will not lie. For now, you are safer where the people love you. The 7 kingdoms are stable, for now. The lions and roses are ripping at the stag, but are continuously vying for his favor, you won't find friends there. A few hold on to past loyalties, though they were brought low in the aftermath of the rebellion. Were you to attempt to seize the throne by force now, millions would pay for it with their lives. Wars are never simple, and anyone who promises simple answers to a difficult question is not telling the truth. And many who would offer alliances, would only do so out of greed, not their belief in you. You are a dragon, Daenerys, do not let others tell you what should be right for you. Do not let them use you for their own gains. I sincerely believe the time will come for you to return. And it will not be as long as you might think, I simply advise caution and restraint. Listen to the whispers on the wind, and care for your people in the meantime. They need your aid the most. Whilst we may never meet each other face to face, I will think of you until my dying day. I wish you only the best, and have faith in you to be the guiding light for a better future. With love. Your Uncle Aemon. A winter's rose, thriving in the shadow of walls of ice, may hide scales beneath a coat of fur. Daenerys had to be careful not to let her tears spill onto the letter. She had family, and they believed in her, they were proud of her. She looked at the other pages that were included. They were stories. Stories of her family. She only briefly skimmed over the first, and it was a tale of Aemon's younger brother Aegon, or Aeg, and his friend, Sir Duncan the Tall. There were many others, not of great heroics, or famous wars, but of family, of intimate moments, of personal tales that lent personality to those she had only ever heard about as historical figures. The last line was eerie. She remembered her visions in the House of the Undying, the blue rose beneath the wall of ice. Were they referring to the same thing? And scales hidden beneath a coat of fur. Scales could only refer to dragons. Was there another Targaryen? Why the fur? Was he referring to himself and the clothes the Night's Watch wore? She also remembered the Mummus dragon. Were they the same, or were they different? There was no disputing that Aemon was true, as she trusted the Valerius not to fabricate this. They couldn't have, not with these tales that were included. No, Aemon was no Mummus dragon. And he lived in the shadow of the wall, but there was no connection to roses. She would need to ask Sir Adam. Maybe he could shed some light on things. But for now, she was simply happy. The words of encouragement, of affection, of understanding, they all healed her soul. And the advice she would take to heart. The people needed her here, for the time being. The Bay of Dragons needed a dragon, and she would not let millions suffer because of her impatience. She would wait, even if she disliked it. Chapter 13, Family. Summary. Dany receives another visitor, there are a few new additions to the Frost family, and the Starks make a trip north. Notes. Here we are, finally Jon and Lyra are going to have company up there. I just finished writing chapter 15, so after that one, I will update whenever I am finished with the next chapter. I write semi-fast, so it could be only a couple of days if the story comes easily to me, or maybe a week or more, if it is more complicated. I also still have to self-edit, and I always wait at least a day after writing to do so, since it is easier to spot errors that way. What I am trying to say is, I am not sure if the updated will be regular or not, but I am still very much working on this story every day. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Daenerys Targaryen. It felt so good to receive tales of her homeland, even if it stung every time Sir Adam mentioned the stags in the castles of dragons. So, they did not spend too much time on the present, and instead focused on their families. Sir Adam was the youngest cousin of Lord Montfort, and nephew to Lucerys Velaryon, her father's master of ships. He told her of Driftmark, of his siblings, and especially Lena, his favorite cousin and apparently a true daughter of the sea, as well as of his cousin and his attempts to regain some of their family's wealth and prestige, after the usurper had punished them hard for their loyalty. Even of little Montoris, the son of Montfort, who was the joy of everyone in the castle, and his new sibling that should have been born by now, though Sir Adam did not know the name or sex due to his long time spent at sea. In return she told him of her own history, though he knew more about her own family, which irked her somewhat. She also briefly mentioned the trials she had to endure, but left out most of the painful parts. Even Missandei and Doria shared some stories, and Grey Worm listened silently. If Sir Adam looked down on the freed slaves, he did not show it, and instead made polite conversation with them all, and even seemed quite interested in the stories that he was told. Eventually, Daenerys could not help herself, and enquired after the question that had been plaguing her mind since the letter. "Sir Adam, what can you tell me of winter roses?" He looked very confused at the sudden change of topic. "May I ask where this curiosity is coming from?" "I came across the term on several occasions," she shrugged, trying to play it off, "and since I have never properly lived in Westeros, I wondered what you may be able to tell me about them." Sir Adam scratched his chin. "I admit that I only know what is common knowledge. The matter that relates the most to your family is that your brother, Rhaegar, crowned Lyanna Stark as the Queen of Love and Beauty with a crown of such roses, when he won the tourney at Harrenhal. It caused quite the scandal, as his wife, the Princess Elia, was also present." "Why did he do that?" She had heard the tale, of course. But no one had ever been able to give her a good explanation towards her brother's intent and reasoning. "Nobody knows," he admitted. This was not in the character of the prince, as he was always seen as dutiful. "A few years later, the rebellion started, indirectly caused by your brother taking Lady Lyanna. Only once the fighting was over, was she seen again by her brother, though he only brought back her remains, as she died when he reached her. Robert Baratheon claims that it was Rhaegar that raped and killed her in the end, though I've once heard that Lord Stark himself claims it was a fever that took her." "And what do you believe?" "If I may be honest, Your Grace, I don't know. I knew none of these people personally, though as I've said, the stories of the prince's personality does not match these tales of rape and murder. In the end, probably only Lord Stark knows the truth, as he was the last person to see his sister alive." "Interesting," she said. She had heard some form of this story, of course. But she did feel like there were too many contradicting stories. She needed more information. "Is there anything else you can tell me about these roses?" "They supposedly only grow in the north. It is said that not even the Tyrells can grow them, and the rose is their sigil." Other than that, he shrugged. "Although, I recall that the Champion of Winterfell has a winter rose as his house's sigil." "The Champion of Winterfell?" Daenerys asked. "Who is that?" "He was the talk of everyone when I left. The king desired a tourney, and used the pretense of the birth of Lord Stark's first grandchild to host one in Winterfell. Jon Frost, the bastard of Lord Stark, who had been granted the lordship of Queen's Crown recently, unseated Sir Barristan Selmy in the joust, and subsequently won it, as well as defeated Sir Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, in the melee, which he also won. Defeating the most famous, or infamous, knights in the realm in their areas of expertise is not something many forget." "Sounds like quite the man," she said. "How old is he?" "Slightly older than yourself, from what I hear. That is partially why it was so impressive. A winter rose for a sigil, of similar age to herself, a son of Lord Stark. Their sigil was a direwolf, they had fur. Some of it fit, but what would a bastard have to do with a dragon? Where exactly is Queen's Crown?" "I do not believe I have heard of it." It is in the former lands of the gift, Sir Adam said. The land belonged to the Night's Watch, until the king granted it back to the north, after the rebellion. I believe, the good Queen Alisanne visited it once, though I do not know more about it. So it is close to the wall. Yes. A day's ride from Castle Black, maybe 2, I'd say. Another piece that fit the puzzle. This John Frost lived very close to Eamon, so her uncle had to know of him. A winter rose in the shadow if the wall. What else could it be? Could he be the one that was mentioned? Was he somehow a hidden dragon? But if Lord Stark was his father, who was his mother? If he was of an age with her, then there was no Targaryen woman that could have birthed him, not to mention that Lord Stark was fighting in the rebellion against her family. He would not have laid with the enemy. Everything fit so perfectly, and yet not at all. It was frustrating. At least, the following Senites progressed in a less emotionally vexing way. A certain routine settled on Meereen, with the rebuilding efforts, and the formation of a professional fighting force of freedmen taking shape. Sir Adam had chosen to remain, and advise her. He had to fake his demise at sea in order to not endanger his family, for making contact with her was a death sentence under the usurper. And as such, could not simply return. His company was not unwelcome, however. He had experience in naval matters, and aided in overseeing the port and ships, helping to boost the economy and trade after the entire way of life had been uprooted in the Bay of Dragons. Beyond that, he provided insight into the politics and happenings of the Seven Kingdoms. Something that she severely lacked, much to her shame. The next great disturbance came, once again, when she was hearing petitioners. "Please state your name and request," Missandei said next to her, as she did with everyone that came before her. "Sir Barristan Selmy, I have come to swear my sword to the Queen." She could not help but let her eyes grow wide at hearing that. Sir Barristan was a living legend, but also the Lord Commander of the usurper's Kingsguard. The man before her certainly fit the description. He was old, well in comparison to her, he was, with white hair and bright blue eyes. He may have been past his prime, but the powerful build could be seen underneath his clothes. He was in no way weak. She shot a quick look towards Sir Adam, who was standing slightly out of sight, and his eyes were filled with awe, recognition, and fear. So this was the real Sir Barristan. "I apologize, but why would you do that, sir?" she asked. "The last I heard you were the Lord Commander of the usurper's Kingsguard." Sir Barristan hung his head slightly. "It has been my greatest shame to serve that man for the last years. A shame which I could no longer endure. So I faked my own death, burning my chambers in the White Sword Tower, and came here, in the hopes of being allowed to offer my services to a ruler I could be proud of." "So you would forsake yet another oath?" She could not keep the bite out of her voice. "No," he said, and actually sounded offended. "I never pledged myself to Robert. I swore to serve the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. And the Targaryens are the rightful rulers of said kingdoms. Hence, I came here." "Then why did you serve the wrong king for so long?" "After the battle at the Trident, I was severely injured. I would have died, had Robert not wanted me as a token. This was before the sacking of King's Landing at the hands of the Lannisters. I was alone, wounded, and in the camp of the enemy. I figured that if I could accompany them to the capital, I could prevent any unnecessary bloodshed, maybe stand as a champion in a trial by combat. But there was nothing to save. Elia, Aegon, Rhaenys, and your father were all dead. Yet I and Viserys lived," Daenerys said. "You could have saved us, helped us." "Had I been able, I would have," Sir Barristan said. She had to begrudgingly admit that he sounded honest. "The first rumors were that you and your brother died at sea, as there was no news of you, so I thought you lost as well. Eventually the rumors changed, and said that you had survived. But you were difficult to find, even for Lord Varys, and I am no spider with intricate webs. Had I tried to seek you out, I would have died, or worse, drawn even more attention to you. But now, everyone knows where you are, but you are nigh untouchable. Now that I knew I could reach you, I came." He was telling the truth, but she felt as though there was more to it than that. "We shall discuss this further in private," she announced. "Then I will judge whether or not I will take you into my services." "As you wish, Your Grace," Sir Barristan said, and bowed. They reconvened in her solar, with Grey Worm and 2 more Unsullied standing guard. I believe you, Sabaristan, she said as she sipped from her wine. But there is more to your tale. I have the feeling as though you are letting certain motivations out. Why now, for example? I have been in Meereen for many moons. Sabaristan sighed. You are correct, Your Grace. I have not lied to you, but there is more to it. Before I ask, are you aware of any other Targaryens? She raised an eyebrow. An interesting question. Are you rethinking your decision of offering your sword to me? Are you looking for another dragon to swear yourself to? No, Your Grace, none of those things, he said. I was simply asking, as I personally know of at least one remaining Targaryen besides yourself. Maester Aemon, she asked. So you do know of him? Yes, that is the man I was referring to. He has written me a letter, she said, feeling confident enough to share that particular piece of information. That is good, Sabaristan said. He has long been forgotten by most of the realm, but you, brother, Rhaegar, wrote to him often. He seemed to be an intelligent man, she said. I enjoyed his words greatly. Do you long to meet him? Of course. I would want to meet any family I have left, she said with conviction. At that, Sabaristan looked at her with a new expression. She couldn't quite place it. What if I told you that I may know of one more? She focused her eyes on him more intently. What did he know? And do you, Sabaristan? Do you know more of my family? I believe so, Your Grace, he said. Have you heard anything of someone called Jon Frost? This time her eyes grew wide again. Is he a dragon? The excitement in her voice could not be hidden. You know of him? Sir Adam told me some, after I inquired after something my uncle wrote me. And what did he write? A winter's rose, thriving in the shadow of walls of ice, may hide scales beneath a coat of fur were his exact words, she said. Then my suspicions are true, he said with a large smile. Jon Frost, or whatever his true name may be, is the last living son of you, brother. So it was true. She could not help herself from smiling as well. How do you know? I saw him, Your Grace. Perhaps you've heard of the tourney at Winterfell. He beat you in the joust, and won both it and the melee, she answered. Yes, he did. There, I got a good look at him. His hair and eyes are that of his mother, Lyanna Stark, but his face, his build, his posture, his movements, they are all those of your brother. Tell me more of him, she demanded. He smiled kindly before continuing. I will tell you all I know, then. The world knows him as Lord Stark's bastard son. The first time I saw him was when Lord Stark brought his sister's bones from the south. He also had a small babe in his arms, one with dark hair and grey eyes. He said his name was Jon Snow, his natural son, though he never specified who the mother was. Some speculated that it was Ashera Dayne, as the two had danced together at Harrenhal, and seemed fond of one another. But the timing for that does not line up. Jon is only a few moons older than yourself, and it lines up pretty well with the date where Lyanna Stark must have died. I have no confirmation of any of this, I am simply connecting some facts, and filling in the blanks, but I believe she died of birthing fever or the birth itself. Lord Stark took Jon and his sister's bones north, and nothing was heard for a decade. Eventually, the request came for Jon to be legitimized, so that he may form a new house, as he would be granted Queen's crown in the far north. The king waved it past, and thought not much of it. The next news came when both Jon and his supposed brother Robb got married in short succession of each other. Robb to Aelys Karstark, and Jon to Lyra Mormont. As there were a few troubles with the Grand Maester at the time, the king did not receive the information on time, and missed attending, or sending gifts. As Robert Baratheon sees Lord Stark as his brother in all but name, he was distraught that he missed it, and when the announcement of Robb's firstborn child arrived, the king decided to sponsor a tourney in Winterfell. It took some moons, but eventually, we arrived. There I saw Jon for the first time. He is tall, taller than me, quite slender, with long dark, curly hair and grey eyes, but his face is that of your brother. I guess Viserys would have shared some similarities with him, but he took more after Aerys, whereas Rhaegar took after your mother. I can see some similar features in you, for that matter. Either way, I saw him with his wife, whom he seems to love dearly, and the rest of his family, of which he appears similarly fond. I did not get to meet him closer until the finals of the joust, as I faced him there. But even in the first rounds, I could tell that the boy has talent. He rides like he is born to it, and handles the lance fairly. But the sword is where he shines. Before the tourney Sir Jaime was considered to be the best sword in the realm. He was humbled by your nephew. For every strike Sir Jaime landed, Jon landed 10, and naturally won the competition. His fighting style is different from Rhaegar's as they had different instructors, but the movement is eerily similar. By that point I had my suspicions. They became stronger when I lost to him. He helped all of his opponents up from the ground, and I was no different. He was polite, and said it was an honor for him to face me. And then he laughed, and I was reminded of a little girl of 3, with black hair and purple eyes, running around the Red Keep, with her black cat named Balerion in her arms, laughing the entire way. He has Rhaenys' smile, and I could never see it. That evening, the king wanted to reward Jon, as he had taken a liking to the boy. It was, however, not mutual. Jon was forced to sit next to the king and looked like he would rather be cleaning the stables. Then the king wanted to knight him. It is considered a great honor to be knighted by the king, and it is very rare. Jon declined. He declined, she asked. Why? I suspect he knows of his parentage, and would not allow himself to be knighted by the man who killed his father, Sir Barristan said. He asked for me to do it, instead. The usurper did not take offense. If he did not show it. Jon claimed it was because I was his childhood hero, and that it was his wish to be knighted by me. Whether or not that is true, I don't know. But it was believable enough, and so the king told me to do it. What happened next? Nothing, really, Sir Barristan said. Jon left with his wife and Sir Beric Dondarrion and Edric Dane, whom he had invited, to go back to Queenscrown, taking with him the considerable winnings of the tourney. Do you think he knows of Aemon? I was told the Queenscrown was only a short ride away from Castle Black, she said. Most assuredly. Jon's uncle Benjen Stark, as well as Lyra's uncle Gia Mormont, serve in the watch. Gia is even Lord Commander. He will know of Aemon, and I suspect that he has visited him already, should he know the truth of his parentage. Maybe that is why Aemon included that line, she thought out loud. Everything certainly matches up. If I had any doubts previously, that line erases them all, he said. Jon is your nephew, of that I am certain. She had to smile widely at that. What is he like, personally? I cannot say that I know him well, Sir Barristan admitted. But from what I have heard and seen myself, I would say that he is honorable, loyal, he loves his family and wife, he seems to be very intelligent, as I hear that Queenscrown is thriving, largely due to his governance, and he is dedicated to whatever he puts his mind to. I even heard that his wife was pregnant, so they should have a child by now, and you a grandniece or grandnephew. That filled her with an even greater warmth. She could never have any children, other than her dragons, but she could meet her nephew's children. She could care for them, like they were her own. If only she could meet them. But her uncle had told her that her time would come. And she would be patient. Maybe she could send messages to him, trade between him and Meereen, maybe she could sneak herself on board a ship and meet him sooner, maybe she could. She realized that most of these things were not possible. Were she in Braavos, or Pentos, maybe. But the Bay of Dragons was moons away from Westeros, and especially the far north. Trade between them would not be natural, and messages would endanger him more than her. Is that why you came? She suddenly realized. You discovered my nephew, but could not go to him because it would endanger him. Yes, Sir Barristan admitted. But also because you are far more removed than he is. He has his family, he has Aemon, and I have no doubt that Lord Stark would call the banners to protect him. He has shielded Jon since he was born, why should he stop now? I could not have offered him anything of value. Whereas for you, I thought I may. I can offer insight into the 7 kingdoms, shield you back, and give advice, if called upon. You have given me something most valuable, the prospect of having family. For that alone, I owe you, she said. So yes, I will accept your sword, Sir Barristan. May you serve House Targaryen faithfully once more. I shall do so with all my heart, your grace, Sir Barristan said, and wheeled to his knees. Rise, Sir Barristan, she commanded. You may rest for the remainder of this day. Tomorrow, your duty begins. As you say, your grace, he nodded, and was escorted to his chambers by one of the Unsullied in the room. That night, as she lay with Dorier in her arms, she imagined what her future may be like, and she realized that she looked forward to it. Not the prospect of conquering the 7 kingdoms, but of having a family that would love her. John Frost. The anxiousness he felt was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Not even his wedding or the tourney at Winterfell had been as nerve-wracking. He was holding Lyra's hand as tightly as he could, as if he could somehow give her the necessary strength to carry though. The Maester and the midwives had asked him to leave, but he refused to do so. What kind of husband would he be if he left Lyra alone with this? She had been in labor for some time. Her water had broken some time past noon, and now it was starting to dim. To say that he was worried, would have been an understatement. He knew that his mother had died in childbirth, and whilst Lyra had no such history in her immediate family, it did little to calm him. "You have to push, my lady," one of the midwives said. "What do you think I'm doing?" Lyra growled through gritted teeth, and let out a scream as the next contractions hit. "One more, push, my lady, I can see the head." "You can do it," Lyra John said to her, as soft as he could. "Soon you will hold our child." "I hope they make it up to me," she groaned. "I expect at least one breakfast in bed in the future, as well as a good amount of cuddles in return for birthing them." "I am sure they will be happy to do so." John tried to smile. So far Lyra was handling it well, and there had been no complications. Also, if she could still find it in her to jest, things must have been well. Even if he believed that the pain was excruciating. He had never heard Lyra scream before. As she did so again, the midwives began to fuss. "It is coming, my lady, continue pushing." After a few moments, Lyra let out a heavy breath, and lumped back into the pillows. But for the first time, John's eyes were not on his wife, but on the small bundle, that was being cleaned and wrapped in clean linens. The screams of a newborn filled the room. "You have a daughter, my lord," my lady the midwife said, and placed her in John's arms. She was the most perfect thing he had ever seen. With small tufts of dark hair, and the typical blue eyes of newborns, though there were some hints of grey already, his daughter looked up at him with great curiosity. She even halted her screams for a short time, though soon continued. "Here," he said, as he handed her to Lyra. Though admittedly, he did so reluctantly. "She is calling for her mother." Lyra held out her arms with a tired smile, and took her with great care. "She has dark hair," she said. "Is this Lyanna?" John said, some tears forming in his eyes. "This is Lyanna. She is perfect. Just like her mother." "Stop it, you old romantic," she laughed weakly. Her smile soon vanished, as another contraction hit. "Here, take her. Her sibling is coming." He gladly took Lyanna back, and rocked her gently. Their second did not take as long to come, and soon the midwives handed Lyra another bundle. "You have another daughter. You did call it intuition, didn't you?" John chuckled, as he leaned over to look at their younger daughter. Her eyes were the same as Lyanna's, but her hair was as white as snow. "You should never have doubted me," Lyra said. "I didn't. And here is your little Snya," she said fondly. He also gave Lyanna back to Lyra, and she soon placed both babes onto her breast, letting them eat for the first time. "They are both so perfect," he said, and kissed her on the forehead. "Our perfect little girls. You always wanted little daughters to spoil." "I will spoil all of our children," but he grinned. "We could buy them pretty things, like bows for their hair, or pretty dresses, or if they are more like Arya, little swords, and ponies to ride when they are not big enough for proper horses. We can braid their hair, like Arya always did in secret with me." "I see you have this all planned out," she smiled. "So you are happy." "Happier than I have ever been. Maybe with the exception of our wedding night. I will not deny that that night was easier," she chuckled dryly, "but this is something different. Are you feeling fine?" At least I think so. Wasn't pleasant, but for these little bundles of future trouble, it was worth it." They stayed up late into the night, never leaving the side of the two little cribs where their daughters were sleeping. Lyra was still weakened, but she was fine, and so were the girls, and that was all that mattered. Lionel was the definite loud one. She tended to fuss quickly, and John smiled fondly, remembering holding his little sister, who had been so similar. Sonia was the complete opposite. She barely made a sound, but watched everything in silence. He had been worried at first, since Lionel had been so vocal, and she had not, but apparently, it was completely normal. "Do you think you will sleep tonight?" Lyra asked next to him. She was bundled up in soft blankets, and was snuggling into his side. "Not a chance in the world," he said. "I want to look at them, until I collapse."